basically this news, I mentioned this yesterday, and I think it was around the middle of the show when the decision came down, that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, based out of New Orleans, this is the most conservative court in the country. It was a 3-judge panel made up of two Trump-appointed judges, and a George W. Bush appointee, 3 Republican judges, basically said that a pregnant woman's fetus has the exact same level of importance in an emergency room as mom. And I mean, this is shocking. You would think that, saving mom would be the priority in a crisis. And weirdly, this all goes back to a strategy that Ronald Reagan used. It was actually in part put into place by Ted Kennedy back in 1986. I mean, Ted Kennedy authored some of the, large parts of this legislation. Remember COBRA? Those of you old enough to, well, actually, even now, I mean, COBRA still exists. If you have a job where your employer is paying for your health insurance, and you leave that job, whether you quit or whether you're fired or laid off or whatever, under COBRA, you can pick up that health insurance and continue it for a period of time. I think it's a year, I'm not certain. But you can continue the insurance for a while. You just have to pay the bill yourself. But you get the price that your employer was paying, which is typically a bulk price, and which was kind of a cool thing. Well, that COBRA law had a smaller provision within it. It was actually written as a whole separate law that wasn't written by Ted Kennedy, but it was called the EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. And what this said, well, actually, let me tell you the basis of this. This started in 1985. There was this major scandal that hit the newspapers. The New York Times reported on it in late 85, and by early 86, it was, like 60 Minutes was doing specials on it, and news reports, and were coming out on this, that hospitals, for-profit hospitals, and even nonprofit hospitals, were dumping their patients, were either refusing to take in people who were indigent or didn't have insurance, or were simply stabilizing them and transporting them immediately to county hospitals and dumping them there. I mean, literally dropping them off outside the emergency rooms in these county hospitals. And the county hospitals were just overwhelmed. They were being crushed by the, financially by the burden of, all these people who couldn't pay their bills. So EMTALA, what this law said was that for-profit hospitals and nonprofit hospitals, but not government-owned hospitals, are required to provide services in an emergency room. And what this did for Ronald Reagan and for subsequent generations of Republican candidates for the presidency is that it gave them an excuse to say, we don't need a national health care system because, everybody in America can get health care. This is, as the New York Times noted back in 2016, quote, Republican politicians have long used the existence of this law as an argument against hastily expanding health insurance coverage when they have objected to a policy proposal's details. George W. Bush, for example, the guy who put the Medicare Advantage scam into law in 2003, he said, quote, let me talk about health care since it's fresh on my mind. The immediate goal is to make sure there are more people on private insurance plans. I mean, people have access to health care in America. After all, you just go to an emergency room. Mitt Romney in 2016, when he was running for, no, it wasn't 2016, whatever the year was, Mitt Romney was running for president, told a New Hampshire audience, he said federal law requires that hospitals treat people whether or not they can pay. So someone who doesn't have health insurance, they can go to the hospital and get free care. So basically what it did is it ended, there was a national discussion going on in the 1980s about a single-payer healthcare system. Franklin Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and John Kennedy had all proposed single-payer healthcare systems. Lyndon Johnson actually put 2 of them into place, Medicare and Medicaid, but neither one of them covered everybody in America. So, this was a long-standing Democratic priority, and opposing it has been a longstanding Republican priority. So this week, a couple days ago, the Republican-appointed judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that EMTALA, under this law, yes, hospitals have to provide health care, but if a woman comes in and she's pregnant and she's in a crisis and that fetus might be viable, you could save the fetus, but it'll kill mom, take that option. Right? And they did it. I mean, it was totally bizarre. This court is so wackadoodle. They would not refer to fetuses as fetuses in their decision. They referred to fetuses as children. And then they said, this is from the ruling itself, quote, EMTALA refers to patients as individuals throughout. Citing the Dictionary Act, HHS claims that the word individual does not include the fetus. The Dictionary Act, however, defines individuals as including every infant member of the species Homo sapiens who is born alive at any stage of development. So, basically what they're saying is that, the fetus has equal rights to the mom. This is shtick, right? And I mean, this is a Sophie's choice, really, for emergency room physicians. Jessica Valenti, who writes a Substack newsletter called Abortion Every Day, was absolutely brilliant about this. She wrote, how many more ways can they make it clear that they want us dead? And I mean that literally. As I wrote in 2022, it's not just that Republican lawmakers in the anti-abortion movement see women dying as an unfortunate but acceptable consequence of making abortion illegal. To them, the most noble thing a pregnant woman can do is die so that a fetus can live. There's a reason, Jessica Valenti writes, that anti-choice groups have spent the last year and a half valorizing pregnant women who decline cancer treatment or other medical care. In part, they're spreading these stories because they know maternal death rates are rising in the wake of Roe's demise, and they want to turn horror stories into martyrdom success stories. They need to make our deaths more palatable. But this goes beyond political strategy. To them, women dying in pregnancy isn't collateral damage. It's just our job. End quote. So, this was Ken Paxton. When the Dobbs decision came down, the Biden administration sent a notice, a letter to every hospital in America saying under EMTALA, you are required to provide emergency abortion care to pregnant women if the pregnancy is threatening their lives. And Ken Paxton sued in federal court saying, no, they don't have to provide emergency abortion care. They can just let mom die. They have to deliver that baby or that child or do whatever possible. Now, in a way, and Ken Paxton won the decision. So in a way now, Republicans are like the dog that caught the car. What are they going to do with this? I mean, in both Ireland and Poland, governments nearly fell. Laws certainly changed because a couple of women in each country died because of the anti-abortion laws in those countries. And, now they've reversed those anti-abortion laws. They certainly have in Ireland. I believe that they have in Poland. I'd have to double check. But they had a huge debate about it last year. So what happens when American women start to die because of this decision by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals? Is that going to change the dialogue around this? Is that going to hurt the Republican Party? Or is it going to, fire up the Republican base? Hey, women dying, this is great. It's just like, they were all happy when babies were torn away from nursing mothers at the southern border. I mean, these people really are pretty vicious. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website.
That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience, with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space, Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics, by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn, a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by 4 arrows.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Monday. It's the beginning of a brand new week. It's raining like crazy out here in Portland. So wherever you are in the United States, it's coming. We've got a huge storm here. It always starts here, right? And then it ends up in the middle of the country and then the East Coast. I guess the East Coast this weekend got the storm we had last Tuesday, Wednesday. Anyhow, we got a lot to talk about today. Right-wing billionaires and Trump want a nation where everything is for sale. Trump trash talks Abraham Lincoln, saying he should have negotiated slavery. Really? It kind of gives you an insight into where the GOP is at right now when their dear leader is talking like this. Also, Joe Biden gave a hell of a speech last week. It happened after we got off the air on Friday, and so I'm just covering it now, but it really deserves sharing some pieces of it with you, and I'll get to those in a minute. At the top of our second hour, our single guest for the day, Erin Reed, is going to drop by. How committed is the Republican Party to destroying the lives of trans people? Also, is Trump planning on declaring war on Latin America instead of putting in place a comprehensive immigration plan if he becomes president? Program. Why don't Republicans love the free market when it comes to Big Pharma? And looks like school board members may be blocked from blocking people on their social media accounts. Say what? I'll explain all that to you when we get to the third hour of the program. So a lot to talk about today, and of course whatever's on your mind as well. But to start out, my rant today, my daily take today over at HartmannReport.com is titled, Right-Wing Billionaires and Trump Want a Nation Where Everything is for Sale. You know, Louise and I were watching, I forget what it was. It was one of those, it was some movie or TV show a week or so ago. And basically there was this rich guy who had moved to a foreign country, a very rich guy, like a billionaire, who had moved to a foreign country specifically because he could basically buy anything he wanted. He could buy drugs, he could buy young girls, he could buy political help, he could buy local politicians, he could buy the police. And, he just was going to live the rest of his life. It's sort of what Jeffrey Epstein did when he bought his own island, right? And
I have seen this, up close and personal when I was trying to get into Uganda back in 1980. I was stuck in Kenya. I was staying at the New Stanley Hotel, which has this big cafe or it's not big, but an outdoor cafe on the back side of the hotel with this giant thorn tree in the middle where people put Post-it notes and little pieces of paper and things, meet me at the corner of so-and-so, or meet me in Tanzania on Thursday. And some of the notes go back to like the 1950s. And Ernest Hemingway used to hang out there. So it's reputed to be where he wrote The Snows of Kilimanjaro. So anyhow, every day I would go down to the Ugandan embassy. Idi Amin had just been kicked out of Uganda by the Tanzanians, and there was a famine going on in northern Uganda. And I was working for an international relief agency, and we were trying to get food into Uganda, which meant I had to get into Uganda first. And every day for 3 days, I went down to the Ugandan embassy and presented my passport and asked for a visa. And every day they said, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to come back tomorrow. And so after 3 days, I was sitting in the cafe, the Thorn Tree Cafe, with this local old British guy. Now, I was in my 30s at the time. This guy was probably, in his 60s or 70s. But every day, he dressed in this three-piece suit, and he would sit out there in the Thorn Tree Cafe in the heat and drink his gin and tonic. Telling me, I got to know him. We would have gin and tonics together every afternoon, and he told me how important it was to drink gin and tonics every day because the juniper berries keep the mosquitoes away, and the tonic, the quinine in the tonic kills malaria, which is, I guess, true. Not the more modern versions of it, but anyhow. So anyhow, I was complaining to him about, I can't get into Uganda, and the guy won't give me a visa. And he said, just put a $20 bill in your passport the next time you hand it to him. And so the next day I did that, a little worried, but I did that, and boom, I got my visa within 30 seconds. I mean, he pulled out his stamp and whack, right there in my passport. And that was one of half a dozen times that I have had bribes solicited from me. Probably the most egregious was in Haiti when the minister who was in charge of, I forget his title, but basically letting foreign charities operate in Haiti, wanted, as I recall, a $5,000 cash bribe. Now, keep in mind, this was during the time of Baby Doc. This was 1980. This was, 43 years ago. I don't know if things have gotten better or worse in Haiti. I know they've gotten a lot better in Uganda. But in any case, this is the world, in my opinion, that right-wing billionaires and Donald Trump are trying to create right here in the United States. You hear these stories about, bribery. I was stopped by a cop in Mexico. I was driving a client, one of the vice presidents of Scientific Atlanta, from the Acapulco airport down to our hotel, and we were going the same speed as everybody on the highway. But I was the gringo, right? So I got pulled over, and the cop says, you're going to have to stay in town for a week and show up for your court date. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I got a flight in 3 days. And he basically said, give me $50 and I can make this go away. And I gave him $50, and he tore up the ticket right in front of me into little pieces and scattered them on the freeway. It was kind of funny. And kind of not. I mean, bribery is never funny. That's the world that these guys want. I mean, just look, for example, at how they spiffed Clarence Thomas to get him to be the deciding vote on Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of politicians and Supreme Court justices. They spent millions. These right-wing billionaires literally spent millions of dollars bribing Clarence Thomas and his wife, Ginny. Ginny had this fat paycheck through the Heritage Foundation, sponsored by right-wing billionaires. Clarence had, he got a free bus. He got a free home for his mom. His son got sent off to a fancy prep school. They go on these $1 million vacations on, massive yachts with private jets. They bought them. And that's what they want to do with all politicians. And frankly, that's what they do with all politicians. You see all over the country, you see Republican politicians taking big bucks from, for example, the fossil fuel industry. And that's why there's not a single Republican in America who will tell you, or at least any high-profile Republicans, that will tell you that climate change is real or that will do anything about it. Every single Republican in Congress voted against Joe Biden's package to do something about climate change. Every single won. Similarly, you're not going to find Republicans who will do anything about the cost of drugs because Big Pharma is paying them off. You won't find any Republicans who will do anything about the Medicare Advantage ripoff because big insurance is paying them off. You who will do anything about banks, big banks ripping you off and, all the hidden charges and everything else because they're all in the pocket of these people. So that bribery that I experienced on a really small scale in Uganda, Haiti, and Mexico, that is what these right-wing billionaires want for America. They want to have absolute immunity for themselves and the ability to buy any politician, to buy any legislation, to do basically anything they want under any circumstances. And this is what Donald Trump has been pitching. I mean, he was, in fact, we have the evidence here. Trump was trash talking China, right, when he came into office because, 30 million jobs were sent to China during the previous 5 administrations. And so, Trump gets into office trash talking China. And then the Chinese embassy in one of the country's largest banks that helps North Korea evade U.S. sanctions shovels $5.5 million into Donald Trump's corporate checkbooks, booking entire floors of Trump properties. And within months, Trump hops on a plane, flies to China, and tells President Xi, "My feeling toward you is an incredibly warm one." Trump is trash-talking Qatar, calling them a funder of terrorism. So, like Mary Trump notes on her brilliant newsletter over on Substack, quote, "In April of 2018, the Qatari Permanent Mission of the United Nations bought a 4th apartment at Trump World Tower for $6.5 million. And then in the same month, Donald welcomed its monarch to the Oval Office and labeled Qatar a partner in stopping the funding of terrorism." Oh, and then Qatar gave Jared Kushner $1 billion to buy out his 666 Fifth Avenue building. Trump was ignoring Kuwait's desire to buy an Air Force worth of F-18 Hornet fighter jets until they, like this is like my sticking that $20 bill in the passport in Nairobi. They moved their Christmas party to his D.C. hotel, putting hundreds of thousands of dollars in his pocket, and suddenly, he's given them the weapon systems. Saudi Arabia. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You want $600 billion in fossil fuel subsidies that help destroy our kids' future? Just give Republicans a few $100 million over the years. Want to own a private island and run an underage sex ring? Just buy off or blackmail enough politicians and a guy who ends up in Trump's cabinet who, basically wrote Epstein, a sweetheart deal. Just in the first few months of the Trump administration, he took money from the pesticide industry and legalized a pesticide that we know causes neurological damage to children. He signed a law that allowed mining operations to dump toxic waste into rivers so that downstream people get poisoned by radioactive waste and arsenic and cadmium. He gutted in a half a dozen, actually in 51 different ways, gutted workers' rights in the first few months of his administration. He was selling off and ruining public parklands for pennies on the dollar. He was stealing from people, he made it legal for big corporations to steal from people's retirement plans without consequence. I mean, we're seeing, Texas's Attorney General, Ken Paxton, insanely corrupt. Virginia's Attorney General went after good government as soon as he took office. I mean, and it's not just American billionaires who are buying off Republicans. Now Vladimir Putin, arguably the richest man in the world, is buying off Republicans. You've got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tommy Tuberville literally quoting Putin talking points, quoting Russian propaganda. The bottom line here, and these billionaires all know it, when everybody's a criminal, nobody's a criminal. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to destroy the rule of law in the United States so that, they can just basically do whatever they want. They can live with impunity and immunity. Now, Democrats are trying to reverse this. They tried this with the For the People Act in 2021. It died in the hands of a Republican filibuster that was aided by Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Hopefully neither of them will be in the Senate next year. So, but the choice has never been starker. Do we want America to be like Uganda and Mexico? Or do we want America to be, what America could be? Get out there and vote.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The stakes this November are huge. Pass it along. Trump trash talks Abraham Lincoln. I'll tell you about that after the break. And welcome back. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. Hey, Maverick, what's on your mind?
Almost an hour, about 50 minutes. Hey, Tom. Sorry, Tom. I'm just a little tiny second of distraction here at work. I got an interesting story for you. Last night I was over at my dearest friend's house, and his dad was in town, 71 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And talked a little bit about politics because the news was on after a football game, and he voted for Trump, and he's going to vote for him again. He thinks did a great job as president.
Uh-huh.
And it was kind of a delicate situation for me because, well, I'm not a fan of the former president. And tonight, I'm going over there again to watch the Huskies play the Michigan Wolverines for the championship in college football. And I will be the only centrist there, and I will be the only one that's a Washington State Huskies fan. And I really want to talk to this guy because he's a family friend, and he's a smart guy. He's 71 years old, and he retired from the United States Navy. And I've been rehearsing a couple of questions. I want to ask him a few things, like, last night I asked him, what did Trump do for the country? And he listed off 7 or 8 things really quickly, and I made no comments on them. I just said, "Oh, okay," because I don't want to cause any trouble or any strife. These are my dearest friends, and I love them. So tonight is going to be really interesting. I plan on asking him questions like, how would you assess the Republican Party from, say, 1965 until present? And I don't know. Got a suggestion as a question to ask? I'm all ears.
My suggestion would be not to talk politics with people you love. If you know that they're Trump uppers. Trump has succeeded in creating a cult, and one of the cardinal characteristics of a cult is that people who are in cults, the cult becomes one of the principal things that they use to define their own identity, their sense of self. It's conceivable that your friend or your father-in-law or whoever this is isn't a fulminating racist, but the vast majority of people who support Trump are. They just, try to be respectable and have, all their little talking points. But
yeah, he did reference the Brown invasion, I think is what he called it.
Exactly. So you're dealing with somebody who's, a white supremacist and a racist, and if you want to maintain a relationship with that person, and I realize, in many cases we just don't have a choice, then I don't know. I doubt you're going to have any success. But let us know what happens.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. So my takeaway from our conversation just now is to talk or not to talk about certain subjects.
That would be the debate for me. I mean, I do this for a living.
Yeah, I really believe in the Hippocratic Oath theory. First do no harm. Right. So it's entirely possible that I will not broach the subject at all. But
I would suggest that.
Anyway, Tom,
he knows what you think right now, right? He knows your opinions.
Possibly.
So just being a decent person around him is you're going to have some osmotic process there that's going to be an example at least. I don't know. Maverick, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Good luck. 22 minutes past the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world
has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. And welcome back. So it turns out it's just bizarre. First of all, actually, even before I get to this, the one good thing Donald Trump, that we all think Donald Trump did on January 6th turns out to be a lie. That's the headline of a piece by Mark Sumner over on Daily Kos this morning. This was reported yesterday by ABC News. Remember about an hour into the riots, the insurrection, the attempted overthrowing of our government, the attempted murder of Mike Pence at the Capitol building, about an hour into that, I guess it was about a half hour into that, Donald Trump appeared to have tweeted, "Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful." Well, it turns out Donald Trump didn't tweet that. That was Dan Scavino, who was begging Donald Trump to call off the dogs, to call off the insurrectionists, and Trump refused to do it. He just sat there watching TV and, go guys, go, for hours. The one thing he did tweet was Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and that was when they started chanting, hang Mike Pence. So the bad tweet was actually from Donald Trump. We've confirmed that. And the good tweet, the one, stay peaceful, that was from Dan Scavino, and Donald Trump refused to say it or to do it. In fact, as he sat there, when people came in and begged him, including his daughter, begged him to do something, he said, well, this is what happens when they try to steal an election. Meanwhile, Trump wants you to know that Abraham Lincoln could have negotiated slavery. Now, actually, there were all kinds of attempts to negotiate slavery. The Missouri Compromise is probably the most famous. There were debates around the Fugitive Slave Act. I mean, there was all kinds of discussion. Abraham Lincoln tried on multiple occasions to work things out. And finally, the South seceded, and he had no choice. He had to go to war. But Donald Trump apparently doesn't know any of that. And saying that he could have negotiated an end to slavery and the Civil War was unnecessary, it's just pure Confederate propaganda. Pure white supremacist propaganda. And in addition to this now, Donald Trump is saying, oh, by the way, I won't overthrow the government if I'm reelected. Except in Illinois, you have to sign this oath, you don't have to, it's optional, but everybody always does. Sign an oath to say, I will not engage in insurrection against the United States. For the first time in 2020 and 2016, Trump signed that oath when he submitted his signatures to get on the ballot in Illinois. This time he refused to sign it. He's refusing to say he won't overthrow the country. Have you seen this on television? I haven't. Why not? It should be big news.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And Joe Biden gave one hell of a speech. I'll tell you all about that on the other side of this break, and I'll pick up your calls. Stay with us. Today, we're reading about Thunderdome politics, an uncivil war taking back our democracy in an age of Trumpian disinformation and Thunderdome politics by Greg Sargent, the Washington Post columnist. This is from his suppression. It's page 37. Republicans and Democrats inhabit different political realities, as mentioned in a previous chapter. But there are certain facts about our politics that are just objectively true. One of them is this. Generally speaking, efforts to make it harder to vote are almost always pushed by Republicans. You cannot understand what is happening in America now without recognizing this stark and very fundamental difference
between the two major political parties. During this decade, procedural hurdles were put into place in around 20 states that in some manner or other have made it harder to vote or to register to vote, or have undone previous efforts to make voting or registering easier, or have otherwise threatened serious disenfranchisement. Most of them were the creation of Republican lawmakers and officials. The difference in the two parties' national platforms for 2016 tells the story. The GOP platform champions additional hurdles that are absurdly disproportionate to the phantom abuse it alleges, while the Democratic platform champions multiple specific ways to make it easier to vote, not harder. The most common and controversial of methods used by Republicans to suppress Democratic turnout is the requirement that would-be voters present identification at the polls. The game here tends to turn on requiring forms of ID that some groups are less likely to have, making participation harder for them. Other restrictions include techniques like cutting back on early voting and making it harder to register, both of which have, in recent years, been instituted in multiple states. Republicans who have passed laws making it harder to vote have tended to claim such measures are necessary to protect against, quote, voter fraud. We'll look at this in more detail below, but for now, note that most of the states that have passed such measures did so while under Republican control. As New York University political scientist Samuel Isikoff has memorably put it, the single predictor necessary to determine whether a state will impose voter access restrictions is whether Republicans control the ballot access process. Scholars trace the modern era of warfare over election rules to the intensely contested presidential election of 2000, in which a divided Supreme Court halted the recount in Florida, throwing the presidency to George W. Bush. The closeness and partisan acrimony of that contest, combined with the intense national focus on election rules that accompanied the court battle over it, helped persuade both parties to invest much more attention and energy on those rules. As a result, both the implementation of measures restricting the ballot and the legal battles over them have intensified in recent years. A brief glance at the surprising history of voter ID laws begins to tell the story of this tightening. In the 1970s, several states implemented voter ID measures, but all of them provided for ways that voters without the proper ID could cast a ballot. By 2000, there were 14 such laws, and they had been implemented by politicians in both parties. But by the mid-2000s, amid rising post-2000 acrimony, a handful of red states began implementing voter ID laws that the nonpartisan National Conference of State Legislatures described as, quote, strict, meaning that they make it easy to disqualify those who don't pass muster. After one of those laws in Indiana was challenged and then upheld in 2008 by the Supreme Court, an escalation began that gained momentum in the Obama era. From 2010 onward, the adoption of voter ID laws in general and of strict ones in particular accelerated. Though a handful were blocked in the courts, as of this writing, a total of 34 states have voter ID laws in effect, 24 that are deemed non-strict and 10 that are deemed strict. The strict ones are in red states or in swing states where they were implemented by Republicans. The story is very similar if you evaluate the state's voting rules in a broader way, by including not just voter ID measures, but also cutbacks to early voting and restrictions on registration. Here the trend is just as pronounced. After the 2010 elections, the Brennan Center for Justice documented a sharp rise in efforts to pass such measures in the state legislatures across the country. Not all these efforts bore fruit, but many did. By the time voting took place in Election Day 2016, some 14 states had these new restrictions in place for the first time in a presidential election. Now, as of this writing, by the Brennan Center's count, some 20 states have successfully implemented either strict voting ID requirements or cutbacks to early voting or restrictions on registration or other measures with meaningful disenfranchising effects. If you're a liberal who's frustrated by the seemingly unbreakable Republican dominance of national politics, not to mention GOP control of most state governments across the country, then the chances are that these restrictions figure heavily into your explanation of this GOP supremacy. Indeed, social media has been absolutely saturated in recent years with variations of the lament that Republican political dominance is largely maintained through a combination of nefarious and undemocratic tactics, such as ballot restrictions that keep constituencies unfriendly to the GOP from voting, and extreme gerrymanders that have, in effect, built a fortress around the GOP's majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats frequently invoke the GOP's use of these tactics, often justifiably, to raise money and to galvanize turnout. This narrative contains some important truths. Some of the forms that these restrictions on voting access have taken in recent years are diabolically obvious in their efforts to keep constituencies supportive of Democrats from voting. Still others boast the distinction of being more insidiously designed and thus less obvious in their intentions. The book is An Uncivil War by Greg Sargent of the Washington Post. Popular vote by 7 million. Trump lost 60 court cases, 60. Trump lost the Republican-controlled states. Trump lost before a Republican-appointed judge, and then other judges. And Trump lost before the United States Supreme Court. All of it, he lost. By the way, did you see Kristen Welker on NBC over the weekend on Meet the Press? This is just astonishing. She let Elise Stefanik come on and just go on and on with pro-Trump propaganda, saying that the people, these insurrectionists, these criminals who tried to end our form of government are hostages. And Kristen Welker didn't even push back. I mean, this is just the complicity of the media in trying to basically make Trump president again is just horrible. I'm just astonished. All right, let's pick up your calls. What's on your mind today? Chaz in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, Chaz, what's up?
Tom, I have a couple of critical announcements I'd like to make.
Okay.
All right. Always wait for your permission. It's your program, man.
Yeah, go for it.
First of all, I want to announce that sometime today, episode 8 of Breakdown with Charles Ames is going to be airing on KTAH FM 101.9 or radiotacoma.org. And, oh, by the way, I want to welcome you to our radio station.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chaz.
Because you are now airing as of today on KTAH FM, radiotacoma.org. That's it, Tom.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Chaz. If the management of the station, if they need anything from us, if they want us to record promos or fundraisers or anything else, just let us know.
I'm sure that's going to happen. And should I do it through what's your preference?
Well, you know how to contact me, Chaz. So just
yes, sir.
Just do that.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tom.
All right. Good talking to you. Jeff in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, one thing about Biden's speech, very few television stations here in Iowa covered it. The only way I saw it was on MSNBC.
Wow.
So it didn't get out. Nobody saw it. But what I called was Trump was here in Iowa at one of his campaign events, and of course this was about 4 days after we had the school shooting in Perry, Iowa. And one of the folks asked Donald Trump, what was your response to this school shooting where a 11-year-old sixth grader was shot? And
dead.
his response, and I quote, "We've got to get over it."
Right. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to tell the parents of a dead 11-year-old. Just get over it. What kind of sociopath talks like that?
And what's so sad about this, all of our local affiliates in Des Moines, KCCI television, WHO, WOI TV, all the affiliates out of Des Moines have been in Perry, Iowa, talking about how this has affected the students, the town, how they're trying to reorganize and come together, how the town is going through grief counseling, and not one damn word is mentioned about the head of the Republican Party coming to Iowa and saying, we just got to get over it.
Yeah.
And I am flabbergasted, and I tell you what, I always thought the state of Iowa was a pretty good place. I think it's a dump, Tom.
Really? Have you lived there your whole life, Jeff?
No, I came up from Missouri. I came up here working on the railroad, met my wife here in Iowa, and I always thought that the state of Iowa were, pretty nice people and stuff. But what I've seen, and these people that would support something like that, it breaks my heart.
Yeah, I totally get it. Jeff, thank you for the update from Iowa. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's nice to hear from you. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. Hey, Tyrone, what's on your mind today?
I was just thinking about this, how are we going to break through to these people? Trump make them people, and the fact that, your desire to feel good is stronger than your desire to even live. And they're willing to give that up so that they can, be in good grace or whatever, follow this man's ideology. But, I've talked to some of these Trump supporters, and they, without any rationale, they tell me, Trump deserved a third term because he was cheated out of the second term. And I asked, well, when was he cheated? Google it. I said, Google what? That he was cheated.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no proof. They don't care. They're like, listen, I like Trump. That's all that matters. I don't care what you say. And I don't know how we could get through to these people, if we should even bother to try, because they're going to vote for him regardless.
Yeah, I think that they're a vanishing minority, or a steadily shrinking minority, frankly. And I just, there was a time when I would debate with these people. Now, when they call up, I just try to get them off the phone as quick. I mean, it's just like, why bother? You can't. You're not going to change their minds. This is who they are. They're racists and they're fascists. I mean, they're authoritarians. They want Big Daddy to to make everything safe for them.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know.
Whoop! I'm sorry, Tyrone. I just dumped you by my accident, and I also just put Wet Les from Winnemucca, Nevada, on the air. Tyrone, give us another shout later on this week. No problem. Wes, my apologies. Les, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Thom Hartmann. Thank you for taking my call.
Hey, Les.
Over the last couple of years, I've been on this show over 20 times, and I listen every day. And every day I learn something from you guys. You got the best show literally on TV.
Well, thank you.
Now, what I want to say is all this hate we got rolled up here, it's so stupid because we're all different because we're supposed to be different. God made us all unique. When your parents say you're special, they're right because we're all special. And we need to realize that we're in this together whether we like it or not. We are in that. Most of us can't fly away to Nairobi or wherever. So we're all in this together, and then all this hate, it's all there, and it's all being pushed to keep us fighting amongst ourselves, so we don't get together and look at the real problem, which is money buying our government.
Yep. Amen.
I've called these stations here around Reno. I've called them all, and I've bitched them out a number of times. I've complained a number of times and said, why won't anyone talk about the fact that our government is being bought by rich people? Why won't you guys do anything? And they always just, okay, well, thanks for your opinion. We'll pass it on.
Well, that's because they're on radio stations that are owned by rich guys.
Well, yeah, of course. The TV stations, of course. But I told them that. I said, look, I understand that rich people don't want taxes raised, but where do they think they got their money? They didn't get it from totalitarian system. They got rich because of democracy and capitalism and the people. And that's what made them rich. And when they remember that, when they see that, we'll see a shift change. Yeah. I think rich people need to learn that they're not going to get everything they want, but they're getting enough to stay richer than the rest of us.
Well, that's the way it was, from the end of World War II, or really from the time of the Great Depression, right through 1981. Rich people just went back to doing business and getting rich, and then of course came Lewis Powell's memo and the Reagan administration. No, I got it.
The wage gap began in 1972 under Nixon.
Yeah,
that's when the wages started going up for the rich people and stay the same or going down.
Yeah, but they really exploded after Reagan's tax cuts.
I
mean, that's when they really exploded. You can argue that began as a result of Franklin Lyndon Johnson's tax cut in 1967, I think it was. Where he dropped the top rate from 91% down to 67%.
My dad wasn't happy about the tax cut that went through back in 61 or 62, I guess, because too much went to rich people.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Under Kennedy.
I got it. Les, thanks for the call. It's the essence of my op-ed today, is that this is what these right-wing billionaires want, is they want a country that is where everything is for sale. Period. We'll be right back. It's 14 minutes before the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
It's your media support group for We the People. We'll be right back with you. And welcome back, Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's on your mind today?
Hey, hi, Tom. How are you?
Good.
I want to get your opinion on this 18 U.S. Code Section 373, solicitation to commit a crime of violence. Mm-hmm. The way that I interpret this is, in my opinion, Trump has been using social media and even television to incite others to commit violence. This code basically says that it is punishable for up to 20 years in prison.
Yeah.
And even someone who is immune from prosecution is not immune from this code. And so if you could look that up, perhaps you can interpret it for
I read it over the weekend. There was an op-ed that was published someplace, Daily Kos or someplace, specifically about this law. And I read it's 3 paragraphs long, the provision of the law, and it sure sounds like it's describing Trump's behavior to me. I think Jack Smith wanted, a very narrowly targeted prosecution of Donald Trump so that he could get it done with before the election, and it would reduce the probabilities of, challenges after the fact of appeals, successful appeals. And that's probably why he didn't use this. But it sure looks to me like Donald Trump has committed has broken this law.
Yeah, on that note, it's my opinion that the reason why Trump has not been arrested is because Jack Smith and Garland and those who are prosecuting Trump, they want to let Trump to continue, talking and doing all his radical behavior, because they're going to use this against him when it comes to trialing Trump. And I think that's a very smart move, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think you're right. We'll see. There are so many other things that Trump could be prosecuted for. My big concern, Alfredo, and love to hear your thoughts on this, is the Justice Department has this policy of not engaging in any kind of activity that might affect the outcome of an election within either 60 or 90 days of the election itself. And James Comey violated that, as I recall, when he, just a week or two before the election, said that they were going to open an investigation into Hillary Clinton. But generally speaking, they pull the plug on things, around that time. And I'm wondering if they're going to suspend their prosecution of Donald Trump, 2 months out from the election in October, September, or something like that. What do you think?
I don't think so, though. In my opinion, even if they were to delay some of these cases until after the election, Trump still needs to win the election.
Yeah.
But I think he will be prosecuted no matter what. That's my opinion, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. Alfredo, thanks for the call.
Me too.
It's good to hear from you. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Speaking the truth, the Trump humpers would really rather you didn't know all about. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. It is about 9.5 minutes before the hour, or 8.5 minutes, excuse me. Tyrone in Chicago. Hey, Tyrone, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Yes, I'm Tom. I called you once before saying, right, Joe Biden, that was a beautiful speech. But you know what, Tom? I wish Joe Biden would reach out to you and most hosts like you and come on your show and answer questions to people, because the media is not doing their job. So could you reach out to President Biden and get him to come on your show?
Well, we've tried that. I don't know if Sean has tried that specifically with Biden. We certainly tried to get Obama on a whole bunch of times over the 7 years I lived in D.C. during his presidency, and it just never happened, which is kind of sad. I mean, George W. Bush used to every year invite all the right-wing radio hosts to the White House, and they would set up their things on a bunch of tables on the lawns of the Capitol building and they called them radio rows. And Bush did that, I think, pretty much every year. Ellen Ratner used to manage those things. Democrats just don't do this, and I'm with you, Tyrone. I think it's a terrible mistake. I think it's a horrible oversight. They need to be paying attention to progressive media and frankly, highlighting progressive media in the United States, because a lot of people don't even know progressive media is out here. So
right.
It's very unfortunate. Tyrone, thanks for the call and the suggestion. Richie in Stowe, Vermont. Hey, Richie, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Great show. Thank you. Thanks for what you do. Tom, just curious on your take on Joe Biden approving weapons to Ukraine and Israel without going through Congress. What's your thought on that?
Well, the weapons that have been sent to Ukraine have all been approved by Congress, to the best of my knowledge. He may have to go around Congress if the Republicans continue regurgitating Putin's talking points, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tommy Tuberville are doing right now. We'll see. With regard to Israel, Biden approved shipping a whole bunch of weapons to Israel that were apparently used in Gaza, including dumb bombs, and I think he's going to pay a political price for it. In fact, he's giving a speech right now at Mother Emanuel Church, the AME Church, and it was just interrupted by some young protesters. I'm assuming that they were, I don't know, I'm watching it on TV, but I can't hear it. I'm assuming that they were protesting Gaza, what's going on in Gaza. So, but, we'll see. We'll see. Richie, thanks for the call. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hi, Tom. You might recall last time that we talked, I told you I had stage 1 colon cancer. Mm-hmm. Well, just this past Thursday, right after New Year's, I had my surgery. It was a success. The cancer is gone, and I'm now home recovering.
Baruch Hashem. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I did hear about Elise Stefanik. I only heard a clip of it. I got to go back and watch Meet the Press stream-wise. But I heard when she says that she thinks the best thing for this nation is to pardon Donald Trump and move on. She is a Trump MAGA.
Oh, she wants to be his vice president. She thinks he's going to pick her for VP. That's why she's saying these things.
But I hope people take note that this is the same Elise Stefanik that was giving the BS on Capitol Hill, talking about the president of that university and the anti-Semitic rants. But then she always defended the anti-Semitic rants of the guy that she's calling for us to pardon and forget.
Right. Taking down President Gay, the president of Harvard University, had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. That was a
I know
a trap.
But then when it comes to Trump, the crucial questions here, he always says he does nothing wrong. He's always saying that it's a witch hunt. I made a joke before that if it's a witch hunt, somebody splash water on him, let's see if he melts, which he won't, then it's not a witch hunt. But nonetheless, the thing is that if he did nothing wrong, A, why is he always delaying these court cases, trying to push them off? And then B, why is he seeking immunity if he did nothing wrong? I mean, I just saw something on Facebook. There was a tweet a friend of mine had just posted that came from Donald Trump, and it says, and I quote, "I have authorized the federal government to arrest anyone who vandalizes or destroys any monument, statue, or other such federal property in the U.S. with up to 10 years in prison as per the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act or such other laws that may be pertinent." Now, assuming this was a fresh tweet from Donald Trump, A, where the hell do you get off, Trump, making such a tweet? You're not in position, not president or anything of such, to be making some kind of authorization.
Oh, it's just a shout out to the racists, to the Confederates. I mean, that's it. And Elise Stefanik, this whole thing with the presidents of these universities. I mean, she's just outraged that a black woman was the head of Harvard University. How dare she? Michael, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1 hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3 hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
Our book for today is Kickback, Exposing the Global Corporate Bribery Network by David Montero. This is from the introduction, Chapter 1. During Watergate, the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate Richard Nixon's alleged tampering with elections was intended to mark the close of a sordid chapter in American history. Instead, that effort, culminating in Nixon's resignation, would prove to be only the beginning of a deeper political morass that America would face for decades to come. Congressional investigations would uncover for the first time that multinational corporations, through slush funds and bribes, were not only secretly funding political organizations at home, like Nixon's re-election campaign, but corrupting foreign officials abroad. This new perspective on the corporate abuse of power and its impact overseas would result in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FPCA, groundbreaking legislation that, by prohibiting commercial bribery for the first time in history, sought to change how capitalism and political affairs were conducted all around the world. Now, more than 40 years later, we are experiencing a kind of deja vu as the special counsel investigates whether the president allegedly abused his power, again by obstructing an inquiry into a possible manipulation of our country's elections. Just as was the case in Watergate, whatever special counsel Robert Mueller uncovers will likely mark the beginning, rather than the end, of a reassessment of how power actually operates in this country. And just as in Watergate, there's the possibility that Mueller's far-reaching probe may reveal how tightly political corruption and corporate corruption are linked through bribery, just under the surface of America's political life. Nixon was the recipient of secret corporate donations, which were considered illegal because they should have been disclosed. But the payments, while unlawful, did not compromise the presidential election itself. Mueller's Russian inquiry is directed at a potentially far more serious crime, whether Donald Trump, the head of a sprawling business empire, colluded with a foreign power to deliberately sway the American electorate, committing the very crime that the FCPA had been trying to eradicate since Watergate, the offer of a foreign bribe, a kickback. That law specifically states that a corporate bribe need not involve an actual exchange of money. An offer of anything of value, such as a promise to a foreign government official, is sufficient to violate its terms. This is precisely what Mueller is trying to ascertain, whether Trump, his company, his associates, or his family, or some combination of them, offered a promise to Russian government officials, a quid pro quo, that if they helped Trump by manipulating the elections, Trump, if victorious, would ease U.S. sanctions against Russia. Doing so would allow greater U.S. investment of Russia and would benefit Russian officials and oligarchs, the Trump Business Organization, the corporate interests of the Trump family, and former members of his senior staff, including Paul Manafort, his one-time campaign chairman, and Michael Flynn, his disgraced national security advisor. If the Trump Organization or anyone connected with it did make such a promise, and depending on how that promise was conveyed to Russian officials, the Justice Department would have strong grounds for pursuing an FCPA charge, among others. An FCPA violation is within Mueller's mandate to investigate, quote, any matters that arose or may arise directly from this investigation. As has been widely observed, Mueller has hired 2 former federal law enforcement officials with extensive experience in investigating fraud, money laundering, and overseas bribery. Andrew Weissman, who ran the Justice Department's fraud section, which enforces the FCPA, and Greg Andres, who helped oversee FCPA policy in the criminal division. The drama playing out in Washington starkly highlights the fact that foreign corporate bribery can be a deeply misleading term. We have come to regard it, when we think of it at all, as something that unscrupulous companies do in distant countries, so that any impact it has must be contained overseas. If a corporation pays kickbacks to a greedy government official abroad, why should we be concerned? But in a highly interconnected world, bound together by a global market, a global financial system, and the constant migration of peoples, goods, capital, corruption rarely stays out there. Bribes eventually harm Americans, American society, American values, and American interests, both domestically and around the world, in ways that are difficult to gauge. Why do firms resort to bribery? The obvious reason is to gain an advantage over their competitors. But illicit payments also buy the illusion of growth in the short term, of increased market share and inflated firm value. It does not take into account the harm that this practice causes to companies themselves, sinking employee morale, diminished profit margins, and the possibility of hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and penalties, not to mention a reputation that will be associated with corruption and deceit. They also effectively steal the public's money, because the majority of bribery cases involve capital-intensive development in infrastructure projects such as roads, dams, defense systems, oil extraction, or mining that are publicly funded. To recoup the bribes involved in winning such contracts, companies conspire with foreign officials to inflate the costs, sometimes by 10 or even hundreds of millions of dollars. While the companies and the officials win out, taxpayers are left shouldering the burden. Corporate bribes involve a remarkable amount of money. The World Bank has estimated $1 trillion a year, although this may represent the high end. Others have placed the market at 10% of the $4 trillion spent annually on global public procurement. The book Kickback by David Montero.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. As you know, I have a couple of newsletters over on Substack, and it's a great platform. I mean, they got a little problem with Nazis right now, but it's kind of a side issue, at least for this conversation. But there are some really extraordinary newsletters, and one of them that I have been reading for some time and strongly recommend you subscribe to is called Erin in the Morning, E-R-I-N. ErinInTheMorning.com is the website. Or you can just go to your Substack app or Substack.com and plug in Erin in the Morning, and it'll pop right up. On Twitter, it's Erin in the Morn, M-O-R-N. And this is by Erin Reed, and heavily focused on trans issues. And on the line with us is Erin Reed, a journalist, mom, host of Erin in the Morning. Erin, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So you have been covering trans issues and transphobia and violence against trans people and this insane hatred of trans people that the Republican Party has been, spreading for just brilliantly. Today's piece that you sent out, Florida bill would make accusation of transphobia defamation with a $35,000 penalty. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so this just came out this morning, and a particular lawmaker in Florida filed a bill that would basically say that if you accuse somebody of transphobia or sexism or homophobia or racism, they could sue you for defamation with a penalty of up to $35,000. Interestingly enough, usually the defense of defamation is truth is an absolute defense against defamation. So there is a separate paragraph that says that you cannot use their religious or scientific beliefs to prove truth of your accusation. And so basically, A pastor, for instance, could get up on the pulpit and spew a bunch of hateful rhetoric, and you could not call that pastor transphobic or homophobic without risking a $35,000 lawsuit.
That's insane. I mean, that sounds like censorship more than anything else to me.
It does, and in fact, this same lawmaker last year was famous for the blogger bill, which made national headlines. It was essentially a bill that would require all bloggers to register with the state if they criticize the government.
Wow. A couple of days ago, you published a piece only 5 days into the new year, and 125 anti-trans pieces of legislation have been introduced around the country. What is the state of the safety of trans people around the nation, and how bad is it getting in red states, and how clearly differentiated are red states from blue states right now on these issues?
Of course. So in the 3 days since I've published that, we are now up to 151, and we continue to grow every day.
Wow.
In terms of safety, I am in touch with many parents, family, friends, et cetera, who are fleeing these states and seeking refuge in blue states. I know some people, for instance, that have fled a state like Alabama to a place like Massachusetts, and they are living out of their van because it is safer right now to be in a van in Massachusetts with your kid than it is to be in Alabama, having your kid pulled off medication and potentially harassed in school, kicked out of bathrooms, and worse. We see bills in some of these states like Florida and Ohio that make it impossible to get your health care. It pulls people off of medication. It makes it in Florida, for instance, if you go to the bathroom that matches your gender identity, if it's not of your assigned sex at birth, you can be in jail for up to a year if somebody tells you to leave. And so the temperature is getting hotter and hotter. And then I want to close off by saying in Texas, even if you leave, even if you get out and you go to Seattle, to Washington State, the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, has filed a lawsuit to pull all of those patients back, to pull all of the medical records from Seattle Children's Hospital back into Texas.
So that he can go after these trans people?
Presumably. We know that, for instance, a couple of years ago, he was the one who started child abuse investigations against the parents of trans kids in the state. And judging that he is now trying to grab medical records from out of state, from the people that left Texas, one presumes that he's going to use those records for some legal purpose.
Yeah, this is a guy who proclaims his great morality, but can't keep it in his pants with regard to his cheating on his own wife. It's just bizarre. You published a piece titled Governor DeWine Uses Anti-Abortion Tactic to Target Trans Adults with De Facto Ban. Tell us about that.
Yes, of course. So this is a new tactic that I'm seeing that is an echo of a lot of the abortion bills that we saw during the Roe v. Wade era pre-Dobbs. And so what we're seeing right now is in Ohio. In Ohio, we saw Governor DeWine veto an anti-trans bill that would allow trans youth to obtain gender-affirming care, which was great. It was a great thing that he did. However, he then turned around only 3 or 4 days later and released regulations that essentially they act as laws that do not outright ban gender-affirming care for transgender adults, but make it so that all of the clinics that provide that care would be closed. I'm going to remind your listeners of what happened during the abortion fight whenever they, for instance, passed bills that said that all abortion clinics had to have hallways that were 14 feet wide. And so what that does to all the clinics in the state is it says either you have to tear down your clinic and build it anew and extend out all your hallways, or your clinic is going to shut down because you don't have the money to operate that clinic. So we're seeing the same thing in Ohio. There are a lot of regulations. For instance, they say that a bioethicist has to be on your team and signing off on all your care, as well as a number of other professions. I don't know when the last time you have visited a bioethicist to get basic healthcare needs met, but I'm just saying that that's not part of most of our routines.
Yeah, it's kind of the legal equivalent of being pecked to death by baby ducks. I mean, this is crazy. What is your best advice on how to talk to people about this? I mean, let me expand on that a little bit. The first people that Adolf Hitler went after, literally within the first month of his chancellorship in Germany in the early 1930s and 33, were trans people, was the trans community. And because of all the minority groups, so racial minority groups, religious minority groups,
gender minority groups. Of all the various minority groups, trans people are probably the smallest minority of all of them. And the one where, most people don't know a trans person, or at least didn't know. I mean, I think that in some ways we're kind of with this issue where we were with gay issues back in the 1950s and 60s when gay people were just first starting to come out. But in any case, this is how do we best communicate to people who have never met a trans person that being trans is a normal thing, that this is part of the spectrum of human experience, and you find it throughout history and in every Aboriginal and Indigenous community that's ever been examined. And B, that, to do anything else is just pure bigotry. I guess I'm ranting here. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
No, of course. So, I think that that's important. I think that actually talking about the history is important. We have always been here. We are as old as what it means to be human itself. If you go back to the very first example of human authorship in Hedwana, she was the first person who signed her name onto something that was written, and she was writing about a transgender priesthood. If we go to Roman times, we had an empress, Elagabalus, who specifically asked for gender-affirming care and who went by feminine terms. In the 1300s, we had a famous Jewish poet, Kalonymus ben Kalonymus, talk about gender dysphoria. So we have always been here, but just like that, we have always faced struggles. You mentioned accurately about what happened back in the rise of fascism in Germany. And what we saw indeed was the very famous book burning pictures that I'm sure so many of your audience remembers from their history books, the black and white pictures of books burning. Those books were of the first 30 years of transgender research by in the Institute of Sexology by Magnus Hirschfeld, a very famous researcher back then. And so in order to talk about where we are today, I think it's important to recognize that we're part of human history. We've always been here. We're always going to be here. And we all have to kind of share this space together. And these laws that target us aren't going to eliminate us. It's just going to hurt us.
Yeah, amen. Erin Reed, independent journalist, mom, host of Erin in the Morning, ERIN, erininthemorning.com, or Erin in the Morn on Twitter. You got to check it out. You need to subscribe to this newsletter over on Substack. Erin is producing just some really, really brilliant work. Erin, thanks so much for dropping by. It's great meeting you. Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you so much for having me on. Bye.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We'll be back in just a moment. Is Trump planning to declare war on Latin America? Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Speaking the truth, the GOP would really rather you didn't know. We'll be right back. And welcome back. And let's pick up some phone calls here. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, not too much, Tom. I want to say this topic of quid pro quo capitalism is probably the second largest epistemic problem we have in this country. And what I mean by that, it's all these years of democracy, Republican democracy, right? And all these regulations. These Trump voters, and I think conservatives in general, seem antithetical to humanity. I mean, they really believe they're the good guys here, Tom. Okay, just like you said, you had to give that guy a bribe to get into Uganda, right?
Yeah.
I've experienced places where the guy told me I was offended because I didn't offer him a bribe. And if I put $20 more on there, we could even be friends.
This is in other countries outside the United States, you mean?
Yes. And that's just kind of a humorous side story.
But for you and me talking about this, having to bribe foreign officials, Americans go, well, that's pretty weird. That would never happen here. But that's exactly what the fossil fuel industry is doing. They're bribing Republicans. It's exactly what the chemical pesticide industry is doing, bribing Republicans. It's exactly what Big Pharma is doing, bribing Republicans. I mean, it's just happening at a much higher level in our country than the on-the-ground level where you have to pay a cop to get out of a traffic ticket.
Well, and let me give you a couple of examples. The Karzai administration in Afghanistan convinced us to stop burning opioid fields because, opium poppy farmers, he would have no supporters. He was right. Another example was the border between Iran and Afghanistan. Even during Saddam days, that was Maliki. Even during Saddam days, Shia pilgrims could cross the border with bribes. Even Saddam didn't try to stop that. All right, so the bottom line is why can't we just do it? Why can't we just let the Republicans have their way? Because we must remain the arsenal of democracy, and we can't if we allow that. And if you don't like the word arsenal, you can say capsule or firewall of democracy. But the minute you go towards quid pro quo, you'll have what you have in China right now, rockets that are fueled with water, and someone got paid to put rocket fuel in there. You'll get situations where communist China is interfering with Taiwanese elections, and guess what they're saying? They're saying your government, Taiwan, is spying on you, Taiwanese citizens. I mean, you know why? Because they care about that in Taiwan. Right. If you are a citizen of Republican America, if you are a citizen of Putin's Russia, or you're a citizen of Xi's China, you don't care. You don't care. All you want is the money, Tom. You don't care if you're being spied on. You don't care if you're putting water in rocket fuels, in rockets, as long as you're getting paid. And we have examples of it. The green to gray, the green to gray pipeline. There's officers in the military that go from Army green to corporate gray, 6-figure salaries. They don't even change offices.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. It is what it is, and it's a big.
It's called the revolving door more generally in government. But yeah, Dave, excellent points all, and this is, I mean, this corruption is what these right-wing billionaires are trying to institutionalize in the United States. This is where they want to take us. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. So Donald Trump, he has announced on multiple occasions various plans when he becomes president again, which he's hoping to do. He wants to become dictator for at least one day. He wants to basically make himself president for life. He's going to, it just goes on and on, right? So now he's got this new thing, and this is, Stephen Miller has been talking about this, as has Donald Trump. And it's a law that has been on the books for a long, long time. It's called the Alien Enemies Act. And the Alien Enemies Act is basically a piece of legislation that was designed to target foreign agents, principally spies, within our country during time of war. So, I mean, this goes back to World War I, World War II. Say during World War II, if there was a German spy here in the United States, you go after him with the Alien Enemies Act. It's substantial. It gives you the ability to arrest people, to deport people, to put people in prison for long periods of time. So Donald Trump says that, and Steve Miller say that if this law, which was first passed in 1798, and it says you can that the president himself can remove any foreign national over the age of 14 from the United States, that this law, and by the way, you have to have declared war on a country. We haven't declared war on a country since World War II. But he says that he's going to identify cartels, gangs, and drug dealers in Latin America and within the United States who have, he's saying we can use this law to attack Mexico because they're so corrupt, and we can use this law to attack gang members in the United States. This is the kind of, I don't care what the law says, I'm a tough guy stuff that appeals to authoritarian right-wingers. You know, that they just, you know, they love this kind of stuff. And he even said, you know, it's not enough to deport the bosses and the drug dealers. He wants to expel their family members and their associates as well. A future Trump administration could, quote, suspend the due process that normally applies to a removal proceeding. That's a quote from Steve Miller. He was on a talk radio show back in September, and he said this. So that Trump could carry out mass deportations and he could start filling his concentration camps, you know, essentially the same way that Adolf Hitler did in the early 1930s in Germany. The first camps, I've been to Dachau a couple of times. You know, it's near Munich, and, you know, kind of between Munich and Nuremberg. And I used to live just north of Nuremberg, and Dachau was not built as a death camp. There were literally hundreds, I believe over 400 of these concentration camps built in Germany, and they were called concentration camps because they concentrated people. In other words, they were points where the criminals in society were brought. They were basically just, you know, prison camps. Now, you know, toward the end of the war, they started killing people in those concentration camps. But the death camps, Hitler built all of the death camps outside Germany. So if they were ever discovered, he could say, oh, Belsen, that's the Dutch. Oh, you know, I'm forgetting the name of the city in Poland. But, you know, well, that was Poland. And, you know, on and on and on, right? He could blame other countries. Well, this is what Donald Trump wants to do. Not the death camps part. He hasn't come out and said that. But the concentration camps, for sure. He's bragging about it. He wants to put millions of people in concentration camps in America. And just like Hitler started out by saying, you know, we're going to put the enemies of the state in there. We're going to put illegal immigrants in there. We're going to put communists in there. You know, people who there's a broad consensus are you know, bad for our country. And then, you know, within a matter of months, journalists started appearing in Dachau, and politicians started appearing in Dachau. And, you know, and just that continued for the next 8 years, you know, for the rest of Hitler's rule. This is what Donald Trump says out loud he wants to do here in the United States. And we should take him seriously. Joe Biden, by the way, was speaking to Mother Emanuel AME Church just about a half hour ago. And he said, white supremacy has no place in America. Which is a pretty amazing thing for an American president to say when you consider that America was built on white supremacy. White supremacy has been a foundation of America throughout its 240-plus year history, and certainly for the 200 years prior to that here in North America. And, you know, white supremacy is still very much alive and well, and in fact, it is the organizing principle right now of the Republican Party. Joe Biden has taken it to them. Good on Joe Biden. We'll be right back. It's 27 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back with your calls. Stay tuned.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back by Thom Hartmann. This is from the introduction titled The Battle to Save Democracy. Excuse me. On September 2nd, 2009, the transnational pharmaceutical giant Pfizer pled guilty to multiple criminal felonies. It had been marketing drugs in a way that may well have led to the deaths of people, and that definitely led physicians to prescribe and patients to use pharmaceuticals in a way that for which they were not intended. Because Pfizer is a corporation, a legal abstraction, really, it couldn't go to jail like fraudster Bernie Madoff or killer John Dillinger. Instead, it paid a $1.2 billion criminal fine to the U.S. government, the biggest in history, as well as an additional $1 billion in civil penalties. The total settlement was more than $2.3 billion, another record. None of Pfizer's executives, decision makers, stockholders, owners, or employees saw even 5 minutes of the inside of a police station or a jail. Most Americans don't even know about this huge and massive crime, nor do they know that the criminal never spent a day in jail. But they do know that in the autumn of 2004, Martha Stewart was convicted of lying to investigators about her sale of stock in another pharmaceutical company. Her crime cost nobody their life, but she famously was escorted off to a women's prison. Had she been a corporation instead of a human being, odds are there would not have even been an investigation. Yet over the past century, and particularly the past 40 years, corporations have repeatedly asserted that they are, in fact, persons, and therefore eligible for the human rights protections of the Bill of Rights. In 2009, the right-wing advocacy group Citizens United argued before the Supreme Court that they had the First Amendment right to free speech and to influence elections through the production and distribution of a slasher documentary designed to destroy Hillary Clinton's ability to win the Democratic nomination. Some political observers assert that they did this in part because they believed that a black man whose first name sounded like Osama and whose middle name was Hussein could never, ever possibly win against a Republican, no matter how poor a candidate they put up. In that, they were following on a 2003 case before the Supreme Court in which Nike claimed it had the First Amendment right to lie in its corporate marketing, a variation of the First Amendment right of free speech. Corporations haven't limited their grasp to the First Amendment. Pretty much any and virtually every amendment that could be used to further corporate interests has been fair game. As you'll learn in this book, in previous decades, a chemical company took to the Supreme Court a case asserting its Fourth Amendment right to privacy from the EPA, snooping into its illegal chemical discharges. Other corporations have asserted Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, as well as asserting the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War to strip slavery from the Constitution, asserting that it protects their right against discrimination by a local community that doesn't want them building a toxic waste incinerator, commercial hog operations, or superstores. If this trend continues, it's probably just a matter of time before a corporation claims the Second Amendment right to bear arms anywhere, anytime, and your credit card company's bill collector shows up at your home with a sidearm. This legal situation is not only bizarre, but also quite the opposite of the visions for this country held by the founders of the nation and the framers of the Constitution. They were sufficiently worried about corporate power that they didn't even include in the Constitution the word corporation, intending instead that the states should tightly regulate corporate behavior, which the states did quite well until just after the Civil War. The American Revolution, you'll learn in this book, was in fact provoked by the misbehavior of a British corporation. Our nation was founded in an anti-corporate power fury. The most significant and oft-quoted precedent of the turning point of corporate power in America began just after the Civil War. It rested on a constitutional amendment successfully written and passed by a group of radical Republicans after the Civil War. That's what they called themselves, radical Republicans, to take slavery out of the Constitution. Given that today's Republican Party has, largely since the robber baron era of the 1880s, been the party of big business and the very rich, it's a bit difficult for some people to get their minds around the possibility that the Republican Party started out as a reform party, that for nearly 70 years, from before Abraham Lincoln until just after Theodore Roosevelt left the party to start a third party, had a strong progressive wing. But the Republican Party did. Although Lincoln was, by today's standards, a moderate Republican, he was still anti-slavery, pro-middle class, and pro-labor. In fact, he famously said labor is superior to capital because it precedes capital. Nobody has wealth until somebody makes something. And he was the first president both to use the word strike in public and to actually stop police and private armies from killing and beating strikers. And just like in today's mainstream Democratic Party, where there's a progressive minority that always seems to be pushing the edges, in the Republican Party of the 1800s, there was a very, even by today's standards, progressive faction. The radical Republicans were a splinter group that emerged in a big way from the Republican Party at its founding in 1854. And just after the Civil War in 1866, they gained a majority among Republicans in the House of Representatives, where they had a powerful influence until the faction disintegrated in the 1870s during the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant. They supported the abolied slaves to vote and participate in government. It goes on from there. Unequal protection, corporate power.
Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out. 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Let's pick up your calls here and see what's on your mind today. Chris in Stuyvesant, New York. Am I saying that right, Chris?
You got it correct this time, man. Stuyvesant, New York. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm good. What's up?
I wanted to reference what you were speaking about, your outrage, and I share it too with the interview on Meet the Press with Elise Stefanik as to how there was no pushback, no challenging to her premises. And I wanted to piggyback onto the back of that, noting a few hours later on that same day on that network, Mehdi Hasan concluded his run of his show on MSNBC, which is now devoid of any real Muslim voices. Not that, Muslim voices should be categorized that way, but I think their excuse for why they've changed the weekend lineup and why they've sidelined 4 different Muslim reporters who had their own shows now into anchor jockey desks. It's disturbing. And I would just pose this question. What if Mehdi Hasan had been at the desk at Meet the Press and Elise Stefanik had tried that?
She wouldn't have gotten away with it. Here's the and by the way, there are, MSNBC still has Ayman Mohadeen and
correct.
Who's the other?
Jasmine Vasugian is going to guest host something.
And Ali Velshi, who's Muslim.
You're correct. Right, him too. Yes.
Yeah. But that said, here's what's going on, Chris. If you're doing an interview show on radio or television, and one party boycotts you, you lose your job.
Exactly.
It's just that simple. If Kristen Welker really gave Elise Stefanik a hard time on Meet the Press, not only would Elise Stefanik refuse to come on the show, but probably the entire Republican caucus show, and Kristen Welker would lose her job. I agree. If I was in her position, I would take that chance, frankly. Although, she's probably being paid millions of dollars a year, and it's really tough to turn down millions of dollars a year just to not piss off a Republican. But our democracy here. I mean, it is a much larger issue. So I'm very sad and disappointed to see Mehdi Hasan lose his weekend show. It was kind of the high point of my Sundays. He did such a great job every Sunday night.
He was great.
Yep.
Yeah.
But,
hopefully he lands on his feet. I miss Tim Russer too. I mean, you talk about how they used to at least confront. Do you remember back when we'd have these Sunday shows, the two parties actually sat across from each other with the moderator so they could actually do some of the, what you just said is not true.
Yeah.
That's all gone now. Now they have one and then the other after that. And the moderators, we say, don't take them to task. So they just talk over each other and go to their talking point.
That's right. They've done that, by the way, because Republicans will not come on programs with Democrats. I mean, I've encountered this myself, in booking for this show. And the Republicans now know that they don't need to play by, standard rules of the game. They don't need to engage in debate. All they need is a friendly venue where they can get out their lies and talking points. And the media has to provide that if they want the GOP to participate in anything. Though, in my opinion, what the media should do is say the Republican Party is no longer a legitimate political party in the United States. It is a party of insurrection. And whenever they come on our air, we are going to ask them about that. And if they don't like it, tough. We'll just start interviewing Democrats.
Exactly.
But I mean, there are some right-wing
I agree.
Democrats out there that they could interview if they want. They could, put Josh Gottheimer on all the time or something. But anyhow, Chris, excellent point. Thank you very much. Greg in Gastonia, North Carolina. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hey, Tom, I want to ask you about your selective criticism of Republican racism. Before I do that, a follow-up to your guest. In 1919, the Navy conducted a covert sting operation against gay sailors under the authority of the Assistant Secretary of the Navy at that time. He said he did it to uplift humanity and the Navy. Do you know who the Secretary was at that time?
It was probably Roosevelt.
Yeah, it was Roosevelt.
Yeah, so, Greg, why are you bothering to trash talk people, Democrats who have been dead for 100 years? What's your agenda here?
Because when you bring these topics up, you never reference them. They always get a pass. And you're the one who's saying that, well, the Republicans get a pass, but you're giving them a pass.
The Democratic Party has completely changed in its position on LGBTQ issues, on its issues around race. The Democratic Party has completely changed. Hang on just a second here. That was, oh yeah, great. It already says right winger. I should have known. Webb in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Hey, Webb, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, long-time listener. Thanks for all your dedication and all you do. As I was sitting here waiting, I used to listen to you on our local radio station until it was sold. And I'm not sure if he was Republican, but they took off all the progressive shows.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
But thanks to Free Speech TV, now I'm able to listen to you. To the caller earlier who was saying, asking for some advice on how to debate with Trump people, and he couldn't come up with much. But one of my favorite things to do is to turn on your show and listen to it with them and debate with them during your show. I think that's been very helpful. But one thing that has become their slogan is "Get over it," and Trump has said that recently, and I've heard it before.
Right.
And it kind of goes back to
he said that about January 6th too. Not just about gun violence, but he said that about January 6th. Get over it.
Exactly. And it goes back to his reality TV shows where you're fired. You're fired.
Yeah.
And it's these one-liners they use to overlook Democrats. And one thing that sickens me is Republicans' actions get overlooked by medias. And as soon as Democrats, it's the first thing reported.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, it is. There is a certain element of man bites dog in there, right, Webb? You expect Democrats to behave well, to respect the law, to respect the nation. You expect Republicans, on the other hand, given the last 7 years, you expect Republicans to behave badly, to trash talk our friends and neighbors and relatives, and to trash talk American democracy. So when a Democrat trash talks democracy, that's news. But,
Right.
I get your point.
Something else that I've noticed callers have said and I've seen is news outlets and even Google searches are not finding the correct information and are steering you towards incorrect information, false. And I just want to say, don't believe everything you think. Don't get your news from Fox or TikToks.
Yeah, I'm with you. Webb, excellent. Thank you very much. Ramon in Loveville, Maryland. Hey, Ramon, what's up?
There's nothing much except that I'm kind of afraid of the 12th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution because every single African-American millennial that I talk to is either not voting or voting for Trump, the black African-American millennials, especially the males. And I haven't run into any of the males that are going to vote for Biden for any reason. And if neither candidate gets 270 electoral votes, Trump gets it because it goes to the House. In the House, I think they would love to run a third candidate just to screw stuff up and make sure neither one gets 270 electoral votes. And then the 12th Amendment lets the House appoint the president and the Senate appoint the vice president.
Right. And the House, and when the House does that, each state has one vote. That one vote is determined by the entire congressional delegation. And I believe there are 32 states where the majority of the congressional delegation is Republican, and only what would that be, 18 or 28? I can't do that math fast. 18 states that are entirely Democratic or mixed.
So even if Trump gets taken off the ballot in some of the states, these House Republicans, if they get their chance, they're going to find a way to get him in there.
Yeah, I agree, and I've seen discussion of this. that the whole one of the dimensions of third partyism, is going to be to try to win the electoral college, or to try to basically blow up the electoral college so it does get thrown into the House, and that's a very, very good point, Ramon, and a legitimate concern. I other than telling people don't vote for third-party candidates, I don't know what to do beyond that. But yeah, it's a real one. Thank you, Ramon, for that. Paul in Ambler, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to talk about the problem we have with our oligarchs in America. Bill Ackman, in particular, the multi-billionaire who runs a hedge fund, he's been attacking the presidents of universities over anti-Semitism. And it turns out that his wife, apparently he's also an MIT or former MIT tenured professor, had several instances of plagiarism on her part, which was reported by the Business Insider. So over the weekend, there's some war starting where he's claiming he's going to get retribution against the people who've broken the sacred code, including the owners of Bloomberg, which would be Michael Bloomberg, who is an even bigger billionaire than this guy, Business Insider. And, you can read about this on Forbes magazine. You can read about this in CNN Business. I mean, this is a big story now.
Yeah, Ali Velshi did it twice over the weekend. He did it Friday night and Saturday morning, that story.
I mean, this hypocrite claims, quote, I'm reading from Forbes now, you never go after someone's family to get at a business person, unquote. Quote, going after the owner of a media company and his family and wife. That's what he's going to do now.
Yeah.
And he's going to start reviewing everyone at MIT, everyone at the Business Insider, all the reporters and staff for examples of plagiarism. I mean, how thin-skinned is this baby that he can't take the heat? He can destroy other people's lives, but if someone points the same scrutiny and shines the same light that he's doing, all of a sudden, the sacred code has been broken.
Yeah.
Wasn't the sacred code broken against Hillary Clinton when she was indicted or investigated for Whitewater, and she wasn't even an elected official? She was just married to the president?
Right.
I mean, give me a break.
Right, yeah. No, I get it, Paul. And, I don't know this guy, and I know very little about him other than mostly what I heard on MSNBC over the weekend on Ali Velshi's show. But it looks like he's really stirred up a hornet's nest, and it'll be interesting to see how much of it blows back on him. I just, it's like get the popcorn. Paul, thanks for the call. It's 46 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Right back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Talk media for the sane among us. Yes, we're still here. And welcome back. Morris in Long Beach, California. Hey, Morris, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, we're going to have some fun this morning. Now, check this out. The Supreme Court's got two things relating to the Trumpster, right? Number one, his immunity. And number two, states having oversight over their election. Okay, let's go with the immunity one first of all. Let's say that the Supreme Court, some way, somehow, supports the president with this immunity thing. I would just love to read the dissenting opinions from Jackson and Stoudemire. I'm not kidding you. They would get rich on book tours, book speeches. I mean, they would get rich, Tom. But there's no way the Supreme Court can support Donald Trump's argument about immunity on this one. There's no way out. And I'm not talking about the Allman Brothers Band 1971 at the Eastmore, but Fillmore. Okay, now that's number one. Number two, it's funny. States have oversight over their election. I don't think the Supreme Court want to mess with that one. But even if they do, let's say whatever their ruling is, some of your red states are not going to respect it, depending on which way it goes. But I remember this one guy that ran, you know better than me, in 1948, he ran for the Senate as a write-in candidate, and he won back in Georgia, was it? Only guy I think that ever ran for office as a write-in candidate.
What was his name?
He ran for the Senate. He was a Southerner. Golly, I'm going to think of it when I hang on. I know people who are listening are shouting it out right now, but they're not online with it. But he's the only guy that ever won. So I believe that the Supreme Court, you're Roberts now, he's in a tough pickle. The guy is in a tough pickle. His court, Thom Hartmann, cannot rule that the president is above the law. He can't do this, okay? But if they were to do it, the people who would be there to protect democracy, the rhetoric, the spirit of the experiment, will be Jackson and Stoudemire, and they would get rich. And in terms of, again, this number two, the states' rights situation about and everybody know, Tom, you know better than anybody, you write books. The states got dominion over that.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Yeah. They got dominion. So it's going to be interesting to see. Here's the what's that word they use? Conundrum. You're going to have two progressive females supporting state right issues when it comes to that states having oversight over their election. Am I tripping, or what do you think, Tom? And I'll take your comments off the end. And thanks for giving me this time.
Yeah, thank you, Morris. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, John Roberts is in a tough position because the court is getting a lot of attention for the corruption of the court itself. And John Roberts' wife has taken over $10 million from law firms that have business before the court. That's pretty sketchy. It's Thomas, who's, been the recipient of literally millions of dollars worth of gifts and vacations and travel and a home for his mom and prep school tuition for his son or his adopted son or whatever semi-adopted son. You've got Amy Coney Barrett, whose husband has opened a law firm to specifically basically trade on her being on the court. Suddenly his business is doing very, very well. And she refuses to recuse herself from cases that involve the fossil fuel industry, even though her father was a Shell Oil lawyer his entire career. It's just there is so much corruption on this court. How they're going to rule, I don't think we can make any reasonable guesses anymore, Morris. I think all bets are off. These guys are going to do whatever they want to do. They just don't care. And Clarence Thomas, refusing to recuse himself from cases that involve his wife, like, the January 6th insurrection. She was there. She was part of it. She was cheering it on. She was calling for Trump to remain president. And he's going to rule on this stuff? I mean, this is crazy. We'll be right back. One of the grand questions that political scientists have been scratching their heads over for years in America is, why do right-wing billionaires fund anti-black history movements? Why are they pouring money into these people? Why are they funding anti-trans movements? I mean, what does this have to do with being a billionaire? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with it, and here's why. Almost 30 million Americans lack health insurance. 37 million of us live in dire poverty. 1 in 5 of us are illiterate. 1/4 of Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental illness and can't get treatment. 316 people are shot every day in America. 44% of us carry student debt. And the billionaires don't want to pay income taxes to deal with any of these problems of society. That's the real issue. If they can get us fighting with each other over black history or over trans people or kids, they win. Then we're not talking about taxing them, raising their taxes to where they should be. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com that you can read and see all the stats and all the hot links. Check it out. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. "52 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Susan in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Susan, what's up?
Well, yes. Hi, Tom. Yes, what I was thinking about was the difference between the so-called liberal media and the right-wing media, which we've already defined the right-wing media has an agenda, and most likely most of it's propaganda, which even in the corporate media, they have their own agenda. But to me, the liberal media isn't really liberal. It's journalism, because we go with the truth.
Yeah. This is the famous saying that, facts have a liberal bias. Reality has a liberal bias.
Yes. Yes, but what that's doing is it's putting us on the defense. So everything we're reporting now is about Trump and what he's going to do to us. But I think, in my opinion now, I love what Biden said and everything, but I also like the fact when he was talking about he needs to finish the job. I'd like to start talking about what's going to happen when we really win the presidency, when we take back the House, and we have the Senate. What are the things that we can get done?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things, even with the idea of abortion. What can Congress do that will stop all these bans? And I think we should start talking about that and bring more of a positive light to all of this. So many people are so sick of hearing about Trump and the fear that he's mongering to all of us.
I think it's a great point, Susan.
And
I'm fully expecting to hear more of that kind of thing from the Biden campaign as time goes on. I mean, he just really basically started campaigning this last week, and this is the year, the Democrats in 2021 tried to pass the For the People Act, which would have gotten money out of politics. It would have provided for publicly funded elections. It would have basically overturned large chunks of Citizens United, which would have been a really good thing. And it would have standardized voting practices across all the states. We really need that terribly. And so
that could open the door for a lot of good things.
I agree, and so I'm very hopeful that we can hold the Senate and even expand the Senate majority, but beyond one seat, and also take back the House. I'm with you, and then let's strengthen the laws around labor so that people can more easily start unions. Let's establish rights for people. For the queer community, let's enforce our civil rights laws and our voting rights laws. There's a lot we can do. Susan, thank you for the call. Excellent points all. Tom in Wells, Michigan. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
I'm in Wells, Maine, Tom.
Oh, Maine. I'm sorry. ME.
Yep, no problem. No problem. First-time caller, but I'd like to watch you on Free Speech TV. Enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, my comments is pretty brief. Amongst many idiotic things Trump says there, something that, he still has this fixation on John McCain. And his comments over the weekend, just really brings it home what a despicable human being he really is. I just, he was making fun of him again about the fact, when he was trying to get him to pledge that he would support Trump. Oh, he could only raise his arm up so high. Never mind the fact that the man was.
This just happened recently, Tom. That Trump did this?
He said, I saw this. I think this was live. Either I think it was Friday night. They had he was going on for a while about a different. What's that?
His Iowa rally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he was going in talking about that and about making fun about him again. And I know this is small potato stuff, but I'm just surprised that he hasn't any legal action. I mean, couldn't the family, if they wanted to, defaming their husband or their father?
I don't think so. I don't think you can defame a public figure. Is the problem?
Yeah. Okay. I just wonder because I think the daughter was really upset about what he had said.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know how people, as a family member, that was just incensed me.
Yeah. Yeah. And Meghan McCain is probably in a lot of pain around this, and her mother, Cindy.
I just don't understand how these people that are supposedly so religious and righteous, and
they're all laughing when Trump is trash talking people.
I don't.
War heroes.
They say, "Oh, I don't like everything he says," but yet they still support the man.
Yeah. Well, it's because he hates the same people they hate, and he's willing to do something about it. He's willing to create concentration camps for black and brown people, basically. That's the holy grail for these people. Tom, thanks a lot for the call, and I hope you call again in the future. It's great to hear from you there in Wells, Maine. We'll be right back with, after the top of the hour. Why don't Republicans love the free market when it comes to Big Pharma?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
We're reading today from Truth in Our Times by David E. McCraw, Deputy General Counsel of the New York Times, the #2 lawyer for the New York Times. This is in Chapter 1, titled Election Day. It opens with a tweet from Donald Trump. The failing New York Times has been wrong about me from the very beginning. Sadly, I would lose the primaries. Said I would lose the primaries on the general election. Fake news. November 8, 2016. At 10 p.m., I made one last circuit of the newsroom. Our CEO, Mark Thompson, stood near the political desk, looking on with his wife and a small group of others connected somehow to the Times. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan remained in doubt, but the reality was sinking in. Donald Trump was on the verge of winning the American presidency. I'd been in newsrooms on election nights before. I know how it's supposed to be. The only thing that ever mattered was the horse race or the historic moment. Think Obama-McCain. There was no investment in which candidate was winning. He or she was destined to disappoint in the long run. And the dominant emotion was a certain not quite cynical detachment amid the electric buzz of the vote count and projections and the anticipation of relief at the endless push of the campaign. Sure, you couldn't ignore the victories or the big picture moments, and the day after stories would be celebratory in their way, duly restrained, but with a nod to victory itself. Not unlike the next day account of a Super Bowl game or Game 7 of the World Series. Capture the triumph for a night or relish the race too close to call. Leave the dancing and crying for others, for the believers. But this night was like no other election night. There had been an investment, not just journalistic, but spiritual. Donald Trump had campaigned not just against Hillary Clinton, but also against the New York Times and the American press, the mainstream American press. And his astonishing rise to the top of the Republican Party had been built on his near daily attacks on facts, on the very idea that facts matter. For journalists who approach truth like a secular religion and who have seen 1,000 times how a single true story could gut the political career of a lying politician, it had been a year of faith-shaking disbelief. A line had not just been crossed, but obliterated. The shock was palpable as the numbers came in, laced for some with the fading hope for a different outcome among people who generally wanted nothing more than a story worth telling. And there was still a paper to put out, a reckoning to account for. It was too much on an already long night. I slipped away. At the elevators, I ran into Sue Craig and a guy who was obviously not from the Times. Sue had broken one of the biggest stories of the campaign. She was the one who went to her mailbox one day in September and found pages from Donald Trump's tax returns in an envelope. She introduced me to her acquaintance. He had once worked for Trump. I didn't ask why he was there. Like me, Sue had decided to get away. It's too weird here, she said. We all got on the elevator. Sue, who had written a devastating story about Trump, me, whose letter to Trump's lawyers had lit up the internet for a week in October, and one of Trump's guys. We rode in silence, a strange tableau on the strangest night of the year. 14 hours earlier, as I came into the building, the Times security guard had called me over. They wanted to make sure I knew about the plans for the next morning. In the quirky ways that things happen at the Times, I had become the lawyer to see for all the things that security guys encountered, from the intruder who pilfered women's shoes to the anonymous letter weaponized with razor blades. The Times was printing thousands of extra newspapers, and tables were going to be set up outside for all the people who would be showing up to buy the New York Times for posterity's sake. The headline, I later learned, was going to read, Madam President. We had been caught flat-footed 8 years earlier when Barack Obama had made history. By the time I arrived for work early in the morning of the 2008 election, the line was already starting to snake down the sidewalk. Soon there were hundreds of Obama supporters who thought, and why wouldn't they, that the place to buy a copy of the New York Times was surely at the New York Times. Lots of things happen at the Times building. Selling newspapers is not one of them. Employees were pressed into emergency duty to cart bundles of newspapers from the Times printing plant in Queens, and the long lines outside the building stretched on into the afternoon. But it was Obama's victory in 2012 that was on my mind this morning. I vote in a neighborhood that is predominantly black and middle class. In 2012, following a drumbeat of stories about how Republicans hoped to suppress voter turnout, I walked into my polling place at a local school 8 minutes after it opened. The line already extended back to the schoolhouse door. Did y'all sleep here, a guy wanted to know as he stepped into the foyer. On this morning in 2016, I had arrived before dawn. I was the only one in line at my precinct's table. That all seemed like a strangely distant memory as midnight approached. I had made my escape from the building with Sue and the Trump guy. At home, I sat alone in the glow of the TV screens as the states that mattered fell into place for the Republicans. I turned it off. Donald Trump was about to become president of the United States. The next morning, in a light drizzle on a gray November day, the newspaper sales tables were set up outside the building as planned. No one stopped. The vendors sat idly amid the stacks. There was no Madam President front page. Instead, the headline read, Trump triumphs, and the first two paragraphs of the lead story talked about how the vote threatened convulsions throughout the country and made an early mention of those who had watched with alarm the rise of Trump. Nearly half the country had voted for the man. I had just spent a weekend in October back in rural Illinois, in my hometown, and for a moment I allowed myself to see the coverage through the eyes of the rest of America, where, at least for this one night, his victory represented a certain kind of hope that change was going to come at last. Truth in Our Times by David McCraw.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. Big Pharma vows to fight this new effort by the Food and Drug Administration to allow the importation of drugs from Canada. Interestingly, this is Florida, Ron DeSantis' Florida, that is tired of paying huge, well, we pay on average for non-generic products, for drugs that are, brand name drugs. We pay on average twice as much as Canadians. Now, there is a reason for this, and the reason for this is that Canada has a national healthcare system that buys all the drugs, right? So they buy the drugs in bulk, they negotiate the price, and they get them for half the price that we pay here. Here in the United States, we don't have a national healthcare system. So, basically every pharmacy chain is buying drugs based on their own individual negotiations. But hey, the higher the price, the better for them, because they have a 50% markup. If they I picked up a prescription a couple of weeks ago, and it was like $145. It was it was a new drug. Oh yeah, this is great. Seriously? It's in Canada, it would be $60 or thereabouts. So this is what's going on. The Rand Corporation has estimated that Canadians pay less than half of what Americans do for brand name drugs. Florida has estimated that, quote, it could save up to $150 million in the first year of the program importing medicines from Canada that treat HIV, AIDS, diabetes, hepatitis C, and psychiatric conditions. At least 8 other states, including Maine, Vermont, and Colorado, have implemented laws authorizing drug importations, and they're just waiting for a green light from the Food and Drug Administration. And the FDA says, yeah, we're inclined to go along with this. And so now Pharma, which is the lobbying group for the big drug manufacturers here in the United States, they're saying we're going to fight this tooth and nail. We are going to defend our right to rip off American consumers or American patients. It kind of tells you everything, right? I mean, Bernie Sanders, Louise and I used to live in Vermont, right? In fact, we started this program out of our living room at our house in Montpelier, Vermont, and, back in 2003. And I remember, our house overlooked Main Street on, Montpelier's a little town of 10,000 people, right? And our house was on a hill that looked down over the center of the town. And I remember Bernie showing up in downtown Montpelier with buses of people. I think Bernie was there. I know the buses were starting there. Bernie might have been showing up for the ones in Burlington. I should fact check myself on that. But in any case, Bernie was organizing these bus trips because it's just a 2-hour drive from Montpelier or Burlington up, right up the freeway, right up to Canada, that it was just, he started out taking, as I recall, cancer patients up there. It was breast cancer. He started out with a caravan of women going to get breast cancer medication. And then he also did this again in 2019 with people with type 1 diabetes to buy insulin across the border. But Big Pharma, powerful pharmaceutical lobby, which has spent billions of dollars on lobbying over the past decade, says, no, we're going to defend our right to rip off Americans. And we're going to use this wonderful Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, which says that we are people and that our money is not money. It's First Amendment protected free speech. We are going to use those things to basically maintain our right to rip off American people. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has just picked up another case. It's interesting, some of the things that the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on this year are going to be actually quite consequential in terms of American democracy going forward. And I'm not just talking about Trump, whether Trump was immune from prosecution for anything he did while he was president, or whether Trump can show up on the ballot in Colorado and Maine. But now there's this new case that they just accepted. They just granted cert, where you had a couple of school board members, people who are just, average people like you and me who decide to run for the school board. They've got a Facebook account or a Twitter account or both. They've had it for years. And then they decide to run for school board. And now they're on the school board, and they might talk about their activities on the school board on their Facebook or Twitter account. And what's at stake is whether they should be allowed to block right-wing trolls. Now, it's really interesting. I mean, these are not school board members who are concerned about left-wing trolls. These are school board members who are concerned about right-wing trolls. And this is going to the Supreme Court. And the argument that's being made is that these people are public officials, and public officials under the First Amendment cannot block people from sending them comments. This is interesting. 3/4 of the American population use social media in their daily lives. I mean, this ruling could have a big impact right across the board. Beginning around, this is from Charles J. Russo over at TalkingPointsMemo.com. Beginning around 2014, 2 school board candidates in the Poway Unified School District in San Diego created Facebook and Twitter pages as part of their campaigns for office. Now, that's another step. That's actually a little more formal, right, than taking your existing account. They continued to use them after they were elected to communicate with residents and seek their input. In 2017, the school board members blocked a couple of children in the district from commenting on their pages. Christopher and Kimberly Garnier repeatedly posted criticism on those pages over such issues as the school board members' handling of race relations in the district and alleged financial wrongdoing by the then superintendent. And the Guardian has responded to being blocked by filing this lawsuit. So this is interesting. Under the First Amendment, officials engaging in state action cannot restrict individual freedom of speech and expression under this. And, you know, these cases have consequences not only for citizens' First Amendment rights, but also for social media companies and users. The court could decide whether social media platforms such as Facebook and X can be liable for allowing a public official to block people's comments. This has the potential to be really big. So, as they say in the radio business, stay tuned, right? So, all that said, let's pick up your calls and see what's on your mind today. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Hope you had a good weekend.
I did. I hope you did too.
I've been a friend in taking walks with the Trumper. We met at a bipartisan or a local nonpartisan election event, and found out that as people we like each other. But I'm liberal, and he's very hard conservative. And also, he was a policeman. He's retired. And I found sometimes anything I say to him, he could spin it back, throw it back, whatever. And I said to him on one true thing he couldn't deny. I just kind of thought of it suddenly. They were talking about breaking into the Capitol. I said, Bill, you're a policeman. You know that if you were on duty that day, you would have had to arrest those people. They were breaking and entering. And it's the one time he didn't say a word.
Yeah.
It hit him at the core of who he felt he was, and he could imagine that.
Yeah.
He would have been there arresting them. He was on duty. They were breaking and entering. Simple as that.
Yep.
And
now Trump's calling them hostages.
Maybe we can hit people. Hit one thing that has meaning to Trumpers that we can get to. Mm-hmm. And I thought, here's something. Let's all vow we're going to do our very best to approach the person in our family that we have a relationship with. We both respect each other. So we've had a relationship, a trust. Mm-hmm. And talk to them and say, look at them right in the eye, kindly look them in the eye and say, can you really take a chance on bringing our democracy down? Can you really make your family members who you love live under a dictatorship? And say, how could you look them in the eye knowing your vote contributed toward their living under a dictatorship?
Right. Did you try that with your friend?
You're going to feel. No, I haven't. I just thought of it as I was waiting to be called.
Yeah.
Or waiting to talk.
Yeah.
But that is what I found. And one thing we should get a T-shirt and say, Democrats give, Republicans take.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's an excellent frame. Diane, thank you. Thank you for the call. And good luck. Keep us up to date on how it goes. 16 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. We'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Mark in Colombia in South America. Mark, I didn't notice that you were calling from outside the country. I would have put you on the air sooner. My apologies. What's up?
No problem, Tom. Very interesting watching from afar here. I've been retired here in Colombia for 4 years, and of course I keep up on everything. Listen, I want to ask you a question. Do you agree with me that the 2024 election in all likelihood will solve the future of democracy in the United States?
Not altogether, no. I think that the fascist movement in this country is large and strong, and it's not going to go away even if Trump is defeated. I think it might cause the Republican Party to back away from their embrace of, racism and homophobia and misogyny and whatnot. Although I can't even say I'm confident about that. But no, I don't.
Well, the reason I asked the question, I'm not, I'm not being facetious or anything, but are you confident? So let's just assume for a moment my view that democracy depends on 2024 election.
Yeah.
Are you confident in an 81-year-old with a popularity rating in the mid-30s is the guy to save democracy?
I am actually, yeah. And I don't think we have an alternative at this point. I mean, the election is kind of carved in stone, at least on the Democratic side. So, Joe Biden is what we have, and I think he's doing a hell of a good job. Have you seen his last two speeches? His speech today at Mother Emanuel, AME, and on Friday at, what was it, Valley Forge, I think?
Well, I saw the Valley Forge speech. I like the words, but he just doesn't do it for me. I mean, I'm not going to vote for Trump, obviously. I'm going to vote for Biden, being, expat here in Columbia. I can send my vote in. But I'm talking about the rest of the people, because and I know polls, this.
Trump is only 3 years younger than Biden. I just think this whole age thing is what the media has latched onto. And although I get it, Biden moves carefully. He moves like an old man. But this is the day and age when people, my friend Norman Lear just died at 101. I mean, and he was working, he was going into the office every day right up until about 6 months ago, as I recall.
Yeah, but I think it's more of a perception thing, because honestly, even though Biden works out, he exercises, he's definitely got a better
He's
diet.
In great shape, actually.
He just looks. He's in great shape, but he looks less energetic when he talks than Trump does. I'm just trying to figure out. And the thing is, aren't you worried about the history of no incumbent who has had an approval rating in the mid-30s, or actually under 50, let alone the mid-30s, has ever won election?
That's not true.
I mean,
Harry Truman's numbers were actually
worse
worse than Joe Biden's are right now.
Is that right?
In the election of 48,
different age, though. No social media and all that kind of stuff. But, I'm worried. I am definitely worried. I mean, I know the polls show Trump is ahead in swing states. And I know it, I realize it's probably too late right now, but I'm just thinking that the Democrats have a history of putting out their weakest candidate. You know what I mean? I just think how exciting it would be if the Democrats had an actual competitive primary. Right, and with people,
I would be all in favor of that, but it's like I said, we have to deal with the reality that we have, Mark, not the reality that we would like. And so, if you're concerned about it, the best thing you can do is talk to all your American expats and get them all lined up to vote for Biden. I mean, it's just that's that simple. Mark, I got to run, but thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us there in Columbia. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. All righty, welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Vicky in Titusville, Florida. Hey, Vicky, what's on your mind today?
Hello, one moment. Let me get the phone here. Yes. I just wanted to say something in reference that about last hour you were talking about Trump. He's going to make war against Latin America.
He says he is.
Yeah, he says. And I remember during his first term, he put on another branch in the immigration to start revoking U.S. citizenships from naturalized citizens.
Yeah, he wanted to try that. He couldn't get it past the courts, but yeah.
No, but this time he probably could do it.
I think you're right.
He could do it if a naturalized citizen puts something in social media he doesn't like, or someone in the neighborhood don't like a naturalized citizen. They come up with something. They're finished. They could come up with anything just to revoke a U.S. citizenship. There are circumstances when it has been revoked because people lie in their applications because they were, they were part maybe of a terrorist group or maybe former Nazis that said, "Oh no, or something like that." It has been done before.
Yeah.
Under certain circumstances, but he would ramp this up, I guess, and even people who were born in the United States, but if their parents were illegal aliens or if their parents are from a country he doesn't like.
Right. He wants to end birthright citizenship. Yeah.
Yeah. It's real. I mean, I think the situation is really serious, and most people are like, the people that worry me the most are the people who think that everything will be fine.
Yeah. No, the bottom line is Trump wants to make America white again. I mean, that should be his slogan.
Yeah, exactly. And the issue of the concentration camps, it's pretty serious.
Yes, it is.
Pretty serious.
It is. And what's shocking to me, Vicki, is the number of Hispanics who are supporting Donald Trump right now.
Yes, that's scary.
I don't know if it's Catholicism, because and it's just about abortion, or if it's being disenchanted with left-wing governments like Venezuela. What do you think? Why do you think Hispanics are supporting Donald Trump?
Part of it, maybe what happened in Venezuela is part of it, and what happened in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
But people need to stop and think. Every country has a unique history why things happen.
Yeah.
People need to stop and think more, and also Catholicism, but there are also a lot of evangelicals in Latin America now.
That's right. It's a
lot of
rapidly growing movement. Yep.
Yeah, it's a rapidly growing. There are Jewish people too. There are some Muslims and there are some Buddhists, but the evangelicals are really taking Latin America by storm too.
And they tend to be very right-wing.
Yes, and I think people need to start more critical thinking skills. This is serious.
I get it. Any suggestions about how we can reach out to the Hispanic community and on behalf of democracy and the Democratic Party?
I would say maybe we need more stations, more education, maybe in Spanish.
Well, there are over 300 right-wing Spanish language talk stations now in the United States. I think there's a couple of dozen progressive ones now.
Yeah, I remember. I think David Parkman was trying to do his show in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Who was?
But David Parkman.
Oh, David Parkman, yeah.
Yeah, he was, but I don't recall of anybody else trying to do a show or information in Spanish.
Yeah.
To counteract.
Does David speak Spanish? Is that how he's doing it, or is he doing simultaneous translation?
No, he's doing separate videos.
Oh, interesting.
He was born in Argentina, so he
was
speaks Spanish.
Oh, I didn't know that. And I've known David for years.
He was born in Argentina.
Huh?
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
so
he was born in
Argentina.
Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David's a good guy. He's a very smart guy.
Yes, he's very smart, and we need more people kind of encouraging people to think more for themselves.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, because the United States is heading to another style Germany, 1930s, I hate to say it.
I agree with you. Vicki, thank you so much for the call and for the information on David. David Packman, by the way, has a program here on Free Speech TV in the evenings. I don't know exactly what time It's after I go to bed. We'll be right back. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Getting back to the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'll be right back with your calls. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the L.A. Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize. Because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is, the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e.
colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
From international trade policy to immigration policy to housing, we've got all kinds of topics. The wars between Republicans and Democrats, the Republican efforts to induce fascism in the United States. A great selection of opinions will be found over at HartmannReport.com. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
And welcome back. Oops, I just realized I didn't plug my USB back in. There we go. All righty. So we are picking up your calls here. Carol in Hemet, California. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Sure. I just want to talk about what's happening out here with voters for this election.
Mm-hmm.
And this situation with Palestine, it is very difficult for people they feel complicit. If they vote for Biden, they feel complicit in a genocide, complicit in war crimes. And I'm worried, I'm heartbroken, I'm scared, because I know what Trump is. I don't want a dictatorship in my country. But my family members, friends, individually, I'm hearing from them, they're not going to vote for Biden over this.
Yeah.
And let me tell you that I am a person that in 2016 spent 9, 10, 12-hour days working for the election to beat Trump. And I, at this moment, cannot vote for Biden. And before you say anything, there's also this matter of this war. It looks like it's going to expand in the Middle East. Yeah. I think the Biden administration, the Democrats, have been made aware by people like me that we can't vote for them over Palestine. I'm praying to God that something happens that changes my mind.
Yeah. Well, the simple reality, Carol, is that Netanyahu is himself a fascist. Netanyahu Biden to be reelected. He wants Donald Trump in the White House. Netanyahu ignored Joe Biden when Joe Biden flew over to Israel right after October 7th and said, please do not do what George W. Bush did. Please do not go in there guns blazing. Let us work together. Let's bring together some regional partners. Let's try to surgically take out Hamas. And Netanyahu said, no, I'm going to bomb the crap out of people. He's got people in his cabinet who are calling for genocide, who are calling for the forced relocation of Gazan citizens into third countries, who are saying, let's have Israel take over this territory, flatten it, turn it into a resort on the Mediterranean. I mean, it's insane. And, I lay this at the feet of Netanyahu, not Biden. I think initially Biden was supportive of Israel. Obviously, now he's backing away. I think that the other shoe has not yet dropped. We will see where this goes. But this cannot stand. And the pressure on the Biden administration has to be huge. I mean, this morning his speech got interrupted by people who were upset about what you're upset about. So, Carol, I take it very seriously. Thank you for the call. Beverly in Lafayette, Louisiana. Hey, Beverly, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm well. What's up?
Okay. One thing I want to thank you that you are just so rational. You lay out every talking point, every fact without getting upset, without ranting, raving, without calling someone out of their name. And you give them a choice.
Usually.
Yeah, usually. Okay, well, I haven't heard you rant. Okay. So I'm working the majority of the time when you're on. But I just thought that they filed a $30 million wrongful death suit because of Alicia Elsie Babbitt on January 6th.
Oh, Ashley Babbitt's husband
died.
just filed a lawsuit against the federal government for his wife's death. Yeah. Why he waited 3 years has got me scratching my head. I'm guessing finally probably some right-wing billionaire loaned him a lawyer.
Right. And then the other thing, okay, how many people got shot? Okay, she got shot. How many others? 5, 6, maybe?
0.
So if they were Black Lives Matter, and I don't have
it would have been a slaughter.
Black Lives Matter. Yes, and no one's looking at that. No one's even said anything about that.
Yeah.
But and Trump is calling them hostage. Okay, one more point, last point. Trump refused to take the pledge of not overthrowing the government.
Right.
One of the items that the Illinois state, he should be booted off. He shouldn't be.
Morally, I completely agree with you. The please swear that you will not overthrow the government of the United States with regard to getting on the ballot in Illinois is not a requirement. It's merely optional. But I'm with you, Beverly. I think it's reprehensible that he goes out of his way to say, no, I might overthrow the government. I mean, he's telling us exactly who he is and what he intends to do. And his fascist followers love it. They want fascism in the United States. They want a government that will round up black and brown people and put them in concentration camps. They want this kind of a government. And, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent them from getting it because I do not want to see America go the way that Nazi Germany did. Beverly, thank you for the call. Dwayne, Petaluma, California. Hey, Dwayne, what's on your mind today?
The 14th Amendment.
Okay, go for it.
And the second line of the 14th Amendment, but Congress may by a vote of 2/3 of each house remove such disability.
Right.
I want to know why on earth all this matter is going to the Supreme Court. Clearly, the Constitution, the 14th Amendment says that only Congress can remove the disability.
That's right. I agree.
And so if I was a Secretary of State of any of the states, I would say that until Congress removes the disability, I can't put the man on there. It doesn't matter what the people on the Supreme Court. I won't.
I agree with you, and so do the Secretaries of State of Maine and Colorado.
But why is it? Why is it going to the Supreme Court? It's
because Donald Trump sued, and he's got three of the people on the Supreme Court he put there.
And the other three right-wingers, they all love him. So, Donald Trump said, I want. And the Supreme Court, the right-wingers, it only takes 4 members to grant cert. They said, sure.
I've seen nothing in the
do whatever you want, Donald.
I've seen nothing in the news that suggests that the people would say that this is non-judiciable, that the Supreme Court's irrelevant to this issue.
Well, there are some pundits. I've heard this conversation specifically on MSNBC over the weekend, suggesting that might be the Supreme Court's decision. That might be their way of avoiding getting themselves in the middle of this whole thing, is to say, we're not going to rule on this because if this, if he is to be left on the ballot, that is up to Congress, according, as you correctly point out, Dwayne, according to the 14th Amendment. We're just going to have to wait and see. I mean, they're going to hold initial arguments on this thing in, about 3 weeks now, 4 weeks? Yeah, I guess it'll be next month.
Has anybody put it to the Supreme Court that it's non-judiciable? Are any of the oppositions making that argument?
I don't know. The arguments. I mean, the pleadings have not yet been made, and right now people are writing up and preparing to submit their friend of the court briefs, their amicus briefs, or amicus briefs rather. And so
that's the one point I would make in an amicus brief is it's non-judiciable.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Dwayne. But on the other hand, you go back to 1803 and Marbury versus Madison, and the Supreme Court basically said, "Oh, we can decide on anything we damn well please. It's up to us what the Constitution says." And that decision, which made President Jefferson crazy, still stands. Dwayne, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Your points are well made, and I don't disagree with them. Ray in Hyattsville, Maryland. Hey, Ray, what's up? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Yeah, Tom. Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's on your mind?
I'm calling about the insurrection, which really was an attempted coup.
Yeah.
Anytime in any country when you listen about a coup, and it's attempted and not completed, all the leaders and everything are rounded up.
Yep.
Right. They're rounded up right then. The military, when they did come in, they came in from the inside and moved all the people outside.
Yeah, Merrick Garland should have done this on day one, and instead he waited 2 years. He dithered.
Right. But the thing was, this was on January the 6th, and the Justice Department was run by the Republicans.
Yep.
And so you had a gap to March before they did, but he did not. When he did come
until
in,
January 20th.
He wanted to treat it. Yeah, right. He did not want to attempt to lock up anybody or do anything.
Right. Well, Bill Barr resigned, right after January 6th. He was so horrified by that. And so then Trump started sticking toadies into the Justice Department, who definitely were not going to hold Donald Trump to account. But on January 21st, Merrick Garland was Attorney General of the United States, or damn close to that. I mean, shortly thereafter. And whether he was confirmed by the Senate at that point or not. And he should have started the process. And instead, he waited 2 years until he was shamed into it by the January 6th committee. And I think it's going to go down in history as one of the great failures of democratic process in this country, of legal process and of democracy.
We did not use the law.
You're right. I completely agree with you, Ray. Trump should have been thrown into jail along with Chessman and just the whole crowd. I mean, the whole bunch of them. They should have been in jail from the get-go. Ray, I got to run, but instead they just went after the low-level people. I mean, this is the problem with American justice. They never go after the people at the top when they're big shots or they're billionaires.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Fair and only slightly unbalanced. I'll be back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's pick up your calls here. Patsy in Shelbyville, Texas. Hey, Patsy, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind today?
Yes, I wanted to remark on the gentleman that had called in a little earlier talking about Mr. Biden's age.
Mm-hmm.
And as you correctly stated, Trump is only 3 years younger than he is. So, I don't know what the big deal is. And then he also said that when he is speaking, he seems more feeble than Trump. I don't agree with that. When he had his, when he was speaking, he was very strong and very firm. Trump don't do nothing but draw when he get up there. So I take issue with that. Also, I try to share as many of David Pakman's videos as I can.
Oh, good.
That's what I wanted to say.
English or Spanish or both?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Patsy. Good to hear from you. Kara in Missoula, Montana. Hey, Kara, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. So I've been frustrated as of late because nobody wants to speak about dominionism. And just when I called, you spoke about it. So thank you. Okay. Mike Flynn is going all over this country, and he is riling people up to murder other citizens, and he's using this dogma to do so.
Right. He's got a roadshow, actually. It's not just him. He's got a whole little crew with him.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And I just wish more and more people would get out and talk about that. And there's even, he's denounced his past. I'm trying to remember what he was, but
he was a general.
Tim Alberta? No, he's a man. I don't know if you ever heard of that man. His name is Tim Alberta.
Yeah,
He's a staff writer for The Atlantic. He wrote American Carnage, and his new book is The Kingdom, Power, and the Glory. And he is even speaking out about this.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to find if there's any way we can get more people to understand what Mike Flynn, and I mean, it's not just Mike Flynn, but it is so serious. And being here in Montana, you can see NAR and the Dominionist, Seven Mountain Mandate, all of that. You can see it completely covering Western Montana and all of Idaho, and it's horrifying.
Yeah, it's a
and
cult.
then the other thing I wanted to speak about.
Sean,
it is
we need to get Tim
Yeah.
Alberta on this program. We really do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm back to you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's
Sure.
not just a cult, though. It's paid. This is big money behind all this. There's a lot of money behind this.
There
so
is.
it's being created. And then when I want to talk about Biden, I understand that people are frustrated with his age. But for millennia, we always held our elders to be the wise ones. And we need to understand that the elders know they've seen stuff like this before. And we need to let them have their wisdom.
I agree.
Yeah.
And
so
I do
have
think of Joe Biden as a wise man. I was not a supporter of his candidacy initially. But I've just been blown away by what he has done these 3 years. I mean, he has, he's partnered with Bernie Sanders. I mean, most of the major legislation that he got passed in the first 2 years when he had Democrats in both the House and Senate, was stuff that came out of Bernie's committee in the Senate.
Right. And real quick, when it comes to the thing with Israel and Palestine, America has compacts, or whatever you want to call them, agreements with Israel that we've had for decades.
Right, since the 40s.
So it's not like we can just decide, all of a sudden we're not going to support them.
No, I get that, but in my opinion, they have stepped over the line. Kara, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So Vivek Ramaswamy, during the first Republican debate, was laying out his vision for America. And by the way, he was the #2 guy in the debate, according to the Washington Post, in which he was arguing that we should basically do away with all of our federal agencies. Really, virtually all of them. Just shut them down and make them go away. He's not the first person to argue this. David Koch, running on the Libertarian ticket in 1980 for vice president, was arguing the same thing. He had a long list of federal agencies he wanted to shut down. This is not an uncommon thing among billionaires, and Ramaswamy is a billionaire. They basically want to take America back to the 1920s before we had what they call the welfare state. And if they do so, they will turn America into a failed state. They want to make America into something like Haiti or Libya, and that would be a disaster. There's a whole article about it that you can read all the details. It's titled, "Is Vivek Ramaswamy a Different Kind of Republican Cat?" at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Taking a
calls here. Janet in Seattle. Hey, Janet, what's on your mind today?
Well, two of your callers took care of most of my comments about Biden, but I want to put one in that I think people equate gray hair with diminished capacity.
Yeah, it's ageism.
And if you go, yeah, it is. And if you go back and look at when he was, I saw him with President Clinton on a clip, and his hair was white back then. Mm-hmm. And if he dyed his hair brown, he'd probably look 20 years younger. And here we have a morbidly obese man with so much garbage associated with him that people think would be a better president, and he's only 3 years younger.
Right.
You know,
and he's starting to show signs of something. I don't know. I mean, in one of his speeches over the weekend, he went off about magnets. He was like, if you pour water on a magnet, they lose their magnetic properties. He was trying to trash electric cars, right? But magnets, you can drop magnets in a glass of water, and they're still magnets. It doesn't matter. But, you know, Trump goes through this whole riff. And you know, had Joe Biden said something that stupid, it would be a front page headline all across America, and everybody would be talking about it today. But because Donald Trump said it, we just kind of shrug our shoulders and go, yeah, he said something stupid, so what? And, you know, I'm with you, Janet. I think it's just Biden's doing a great job. And Trump is getting weirder and weirder and more fascist with every day that goes by. And the media just wants to pretend like it's all normal. Let's just talk to Elise Stefanik and not challenge her. It's insane. Janet, thank you. Excellent points. Mario in Chicago. Hey, Mario, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Sir, thank you very much for taking my call. I hope I have enough wisdom to express my feelings. I heard a couple of weeks ago about these Palestinians. They're not going to vote for Mr. Biden. I just hear a lady, they're not going to vote for Mr. Biden. I think she's Mexican, the origin. I was born in Mexico. I left Mexico because it's a corrupted country. Take a look at the Palestinians. Their government was very corrupt, taking all the money. And everybody will come over here to better of lives. I just implore these people, be careful what you're asking for. When you're not going to vote for Biden, remember why you came to this country, to better yourself. We have a democracy. It's not easy. Democracy is not easy. We have to get involved. We have to put attention where they're doing. All these people is washing their brains. We're not running against Trump. We're running against all these oligarchs, all this media.
And not voting is a vote for Trump. You know, I feel let's just make it very clear. So
this weekend, I hit all these channels. Everybody was trashing Clinton because we're his ensign, but not Trump. They were trashing Mr. Biden. It's not good enough, but not Trump. Yep. It's the media that we're running, and they're washing their brains. To everybody listen to, please, Muslims, Palestinians, Mexicans, be careful what you're doing because you're going to hurt yourself.
Very well said, Mario. Very well said. Mario, I want to get one more caller in here before the end of the show, but thank you very much for that. That was brilliant. Stephan in Mentor, Ohio. Hey, Stephan, what's on your mind today?
Happy New Year to you.
Hey, thank you. Back at you.
Yeah. Four things. Trump is the cause of the Ukrainian war because he allowed Putin, he told Putin that he was going to trash NATO. That's number one. And Trump caused this immigration issue because he took the funds for Central America. Number three, Trump is the reason 500,000 people died in this country needlessly because of his policies.
Right, with regard to COVID, yep.
Yeah, and the war with Palestine, again, Trump is another Netanyahu.
Yeah,
so
and vice versa. Yeah, I'm with you. Stephan, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So double check your voter registration, especially if you live in a red state. They are purging Democrats in the blue cities right now as we speak. So double check your voter registration every month and get out there, get active, tag
you're it. Have a great afternoon. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1 hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3 hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!